Chapter 171. The moment Yi Xian opened his eyes, his aura suddenly soared. In an instant, it was no weaker than Li Mu's aura. Feeling the aura on Yi Xian's body, Li Mu was stunned. His eyes were filled with disbelief. How was this possible? He knew that there were some divine abilities and secret arts in the world that could temporarily increase a person's cultivation level. However, he had never seen anyone who could increase his cultivation level in an instant. From the Nether Passage realm to his level, this was a jump of 3 realms. This was simply impossible. But at this moment, Yi Xian really did it. On this day, Yi Xian had given him too many surprises. No, it was a shock. This time, he was really shocked. Not far away, Yi Xian slowly walked towards Li Mu. With every step he took, the entire ground would tremble violently. At the same time, the aura around his body was still rising, becoming stronger and stronger, as if there was no end. Li Mu suddenly grinned. Above the Dharma realm? Impossible. I think you're just playing tricks. As his voice fell, he took a step forward and pointed at Yi Xian. As soon as he pointed, the space in front of Yi Xian suddenly shook violently. In the next moment, an illusory giant finger suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. The giant finger contained a powerful force that instantly caused the space in front of Yi Xian to distort. At this time, Yi Xian's right hand suddenly bent inward, forming a claw. In the next moment, he clawed forward. Bang! In an instant, the giant finger in front of Yi Xian instantly shattered. Li Mu's pupils shrank, and he lost his voice. How is this possible? No, this is absolutely impossible. You can't reach above the Dharma realm. At this time, Yi Xian smiled coldly. This smile did not look like a human smile, and the surrounding soldiers felt their hair stand on end. Yi Xian suddenly took a step forward, and with this step, he disappeared on the spot. This was no longer speed, but teleportation. Li Mu's expression changed drastically when he saw Yi Xian vanish. He took a step forward and smashed his fist forward, and this punch directly caused the space before him to tremble violently. The 10,000 Laws realm could distort all things to a certain extent. Above the 10,000 Laws realm, one could borrow the power of all things to a certain extent. At this moment, he borrowed the power of space and the unique properties of space to strengthen his own strength. This realm was known as the Spell Manipulation Realm. Imperial Laws, Imperial Laws, Imperial Laws, Imperial Laws. Li Mu's punch was not a simple one. It could be said that it could directly destroy a city. However, this punch was caught by Yi Xian's claw. Caught it. Seeing his fist being caught by Yi Xian's claw, Li Mu was stunned. At this moment, the power in his fist was also exploding, but it was forcibly blocked by Yi Xian's claw. Yi Xian suddenly clenched Li Mu's fist and twisted it. Crack! Li Mu's entire arm instantly shattered, and blood splattered. Li Mu was shocked and was about to retreat, but at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly pressed forward. Before Li Mu could react, Yi Xian's hand had grabbed Li Mu's throat. In the blink of an eye, Yi Xian had already grabbed Li Mu's throat and appeared hundreds of feet away. As soon as they stopped, Yi Xian grabbed Li Mu's throat and pulled him down. This chapter is not finished. Please continue to the next page. The ground suddenly smashed. Bang! The ground shattered, and Li Mu's head directly sank into the ground. Yi Xian stepped towards Li Mu's head. Bang! Li Mu's head sunk even deeper, and his body and feet trembled violently on the ground. Yi Xian looked coldly at Li Mu on the ground. In the next moment, he grabbed Li Mu's 2 legs and suddenly tore them apart. Crack! In an instant, Li Mu was directly torn into 2 halves. Seeing this scene, everyone present instantly felt their hair stand on end. A Dharma defensive realm expert was killed by Yi Xian just like that? Not far away, Yi Xian turned his head and looked around. The soldiers around him all retreated quickly, and some of them were so scared that their legs turned to jelly, and they couldn't even walk. Yi Xian suddenly raised his head and looked towards the horizon, and there was a trace of greed in his eyes. Freedom. It had been a long time since he had obtained freedom. Gradually, he slowly closed his eyes. After an unknown period of time, he suddenly turned his head and looked at the group of black flame cavalrymen not far away. In the next moment, he swung his claw. Bang! In the distance, the group of black flame cavalrymen instantly fell to the ground, and in an instant, blood flowed out from their armor. Over 100 people were all dead. However, Their armor and equipment were still intact. Yi Xian suddenly turned his head and looked at Tuoba Yen on the ground not far away. With a point of his finger, a ray of green light suddenly entered Tuoba Yan's body. In an instant, his body trembled violently, and in the next moment, an illusory figure suddenly shot into the sky. This illusory figure went straight into the clouds and disappeared without a trace in the blink of an eye. Yi Xian, on the other hand, was lying on the ground. His eyes were empty. Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. The great god from the second floor had left. He had left with his Dao Law. However, he would return, because the Dao Law could only let him go out for a short period of time. His origin was still locked in the second floor. As long as his origin was still there, he would definitely return. However, he was still a little worried. Based on the great god's possession, this second floor god was really not a kind person. Not only was he not a kind person, but he was also a crazy and perverted fellow. This was because at a certain moment, he had already sensed the other party's killing intent towards him. Although he did not make a move in the end, it was definitely because of the mysterious woman and the world prison pagoda. Otherwise, he would probably have died a few hundred times. This fellow would definitely cause a big trouble if he went out. Yi Xian shook his head and stopped thinking about the great god from the second floor who had already disappeared. He slowly got up. At this moment, Zhang Jiu hurriedly walked in front of him and supported him. Yi Xian said softly, "Go and chase after the remnants of the Chu Kingdom's army. Leave this to me." When the Black Flame cavalry was completely annihilated, the Chu Kingdom's cavalry had already begun to flee. The Dark World had also instantly disappeared without a trace. Yi Xian was a little weak. This time, the Chu Kingdom's cavalry suffered a heavy blow and fled like startled birds. To our Jiang Kingdom, this is undoubtedly a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. If we don't seize the opportunity to chase after them and annihilate their main force, we'll be in trouble when they regroup. Don't lose this opportunity. Go, I'll be fine. Zhang Jiu nodded. Be careful. With that, she turned and left. Before long, Zhang Jiu gathered all the soldiers who were still capable of fighting and chased after Tuoba Yen. Yi Xian walked slowly to Tuoba Yen. This chapter is not over. Please continue to the next page. Although Tuoba Yen looked very miserable at this moment, his aura was still present. This was the reason why he gave the Dao Law to the great god from the second floor. He had to save Tuoba Yen. Then, he would give the Dao Law to him and let him leave. If he didn't agree, the great god from the second floor would never leave the world prison pagoda because the Dao Law could suppress him and prevent him from leaving the pagoda. On the other hand, giving the Dao Law to the great god from the second floor was more dangerous for him. If that fellow didn't return and couldn't bring back the Dao Law, then he would definitely be beaten up by the mysterious woman. Yi Xian stopped thinking about the great god from the second floor who had disappeared to God knows where. He squatted down slowly before Tuoba Yen and looked at the woman before him with rather complicated feelings in his heart. If Tuoba Yen hadn't utilized that lightning shield earlier, he might have been killed by Li Mu with a single strike. Li Mu. Kuraki Academy. Yi Xian clenched his right hand tightly. He'd underestimated Kuraki Academy's determination. The stronger the strength he displayed, the more Kuraki Academy would think of ways to kill him. The conflict between him and Kuraki Academy would never rest until one side was dead. Meanwhile, Tuoba Yan's right hand trembled slightly, and Yi Xian hurriedly carried her. Tuoba Yen slowly opened her eyes, and she was instantly stunned when she saw Yi Xian. "You're dead as well." Yi Xian nodded. "Yes, I'm here to accompany you." Tuoba Yen was stunned, and then she said, "Why are you so silly? You." At this point, she suddenly turned around and looked at Yi Xian with rage in her beautiful eyes. "Do you want to die?" Yi Xian chuckled. "It feels good to joke with you." Tuoba Yen glanced at Yi Xian. "Why am I not dead?" Yi Xian said, "A senior acted." As he spoke, he paused for a moment and asked, "Why did you stand in front of me just now? You could have died." Tuoba Yen spoke indifferently. "If I knew I would die, I wouldn't have done that." Hearing this, Yi Xian's body stiffened. In an instant, his heart was filled with mixed feelings, disappointment, self-mockery. After a moment, he smiled awkwardly. "Oh." Tuoba Yen glanced at Yi Xian. She struggled free of Yi Xian's hand and stood up with difficulty. After that, she walked away expressionlessly. It didn't take long for Tuoba Yen to leave with the remaining Ning Kingdom cavalry. At this moment, Mo Yunqi suddenly limped over to Yi Xian, and he lightly nudged the dazed Yi Xian with his right hand. Bandit Yi, are you really stupid or are you pretending to be stupid? Yi Xian looked at Mo Yunqi with a puzzled expression. Mo Yunqi shook his head. Bandit Yi, they came all the way here to help. Who is it for? Is it the Jiang Kingdom? If it weren't for you, the Ning Kingdom would not have come to help the Jiang Kingdom. Moreover, there's something fishy going on between the two of you. I'm sure that Lord Tuoba came for you. As he spoke, he sighed softly. As for your previous question, please, think about it carefully. It's a Dharma-controlling realm expert. With Lord Tuoba's wisdom, how could he not know how terrifying Li Mu is? She stood in front of you and prepared for the worst. Yi Xian was stunned. After a moment, he suddenly kicked Mo Yunqi's butt. Why didn't you say so earlier? With that, he disappeared into the distance. On the ground not far away, Mo Yunqi lay on the ground, hugging his butt tightly and wailing. You didn't ask. P.S. And, end of this chapter. Chapter 172. His words enlightened the dreamer. After hearing Mo Yunqi's words, Yi Xian suddenly came to a realization. On a plain, Yi Xian rode the black wolf and galloped wildly. In life, one must not let a misunderstanding become a lifelong regret. Yi Xian's black wolf was obviously faster than ordinary horses. Soon, the Ning Kingdom's cavalry appeared in Yi Xian's sight. In front of him, Tuoba Yen was riding in the lead. Beside her, a cavalry general suddenly said, Your Majesty, someone is chasing behind us. It seems to be Yi Xian of the Jiang Kingdom. Tuoba Yen was expressionless and sped up. The general did not dare to say anything and retreated. At this time, Yi Xian had sped up and was getting closer and closer to the Ning Kingdom soldiers. The Ning Kingdom soldiers turned to look at Yi Xian. No one stopped him, nor did they dare to stop him. Now, Yi Xian's fame was not only in the Jiang Kingdom, but also in the entire Qingzhou. In particular, the scene of Yi Xian tearing Li Mu apart was deeply engraved in the hearts of the Ning Kingdom soldiers. What a ruthless person! Soon, Yi Xian stood in front of Tuoba Yen. The Ning Kingdom's cavalry stopped, but Tuoba Yen did not stop. Instead, he sped up. Seeing that Tuoba Yen did not stop, Yi Xian's eyelids twitched. What was this woman going to do? Below Yi Xian, the black wolf was already roaring with a fierce glint in its eyes. The distance between the two was less than 30 feet. Yi Xian suddenly flew up and landed behind Tuoba Yen in the next moment. Tuoba Yen was about to make a move when Yi Xian suddenly put his arm around Tuoba Yan's waist and said softly, I'm sorry. Tuoba Yan's body stiffened. At this moment, the horse had already rushed dozens of feet away. Behind the two, a group of Ning Kingdom soldiers looked at each other. At the end of the distance, Yi Xian and Tuoba Yen rode slowly. On the horse, Tuoba Yen was expressionless and looked a little cold. Yi Xian's hand was still wrapped around Tuoba Yan's waist. Tuoba Yen did not refuse. Just like that, the two of them were slowly carried by the horse into the distance. Under the setting sun, everything was peaceful. After an unknown period of time, Yi Xian softly said, I'm sorry. Tuoba Yen still said nothing. Yi Xian lightly tapped the ground with his feet and soared into the air before landing steadily in front of Tuoba Yen. The two of them sat opposite each other. Tuoba Yen looked at Yi Xian and said nothing. Yi Xian smiled bitterly because he really didn't know how to coax a woman. He had only coaxed his sister, and she was easy to coax. However, the person in front of him was the Empress. Tuoba Yen was about to jump off his horse when Yi Xian hurriedly pulled his hand. Tuoba Yen looked at Yi Xian, and Yi Xian said softly, Thank you. Tuoba Yen was expressionless and still said nothing. Yi Xian was about to speak when the world prison pagoda in his body shook violently. Yi Xian's head instantly suffered a heavy blow, and he fell straight onto the horse. On the ground, Yi Xian's body kept twitching. Tuoba Yen turned to leave, but after a few steps, she suddenly stopped and turned to look at Yi Xian. At this moment, she frowned and quickly walked in front of Yi Xian. At this moment, blood was slowly flowing out of Yi Xian's 7 orifices. Tuoba Yan's face darkened. She squatted in front of Yi Xian and seemed to think of something. She hurriedly took out a golden sword pill and fed it to Yi Xian, but it didn't have any effect. Tuoba Yen took out another golden sore pill. Yi Xian suddenly shook his head and said with a trembling voice, "No, no need. BB backlash. Just rest for a while." Tuoba Yen looked at Yi Xian's twisted features and said nothing. Backlash. In fact, Yi Xian knew that it wasn't just backlash. After the Dao Law left the World Prison Pagoda, the World Prison Pagoda became unstable. And he suffered the most from the instability of the World Prison Pagoda. However, he had no choice. If he didn't let the god on the second floor out for a stroll, the god on the second floor would definitely not help him fight, much less save him. Endure it. But this was really too king painful. It wasn't just physical pain, but also mental pain. At this moment, he felt like his head was about to explode. That feeling couldn't be described with words. He could only endure it. Just like that, after an unknown period of time, the sky darkened and a bright moon slowly rose. Moonlight poured down, covering the earth with a thin veil. Under the night sky, Yi Xian's right hand trembled slightly. Gradually, he regained consciousness. His first feeling was softness. His lower body was so soft. Soon, Yi Xian discovered that he was lying in Tuoba Yan's arms. Sensing Yi Xian's abnormality, Tuoba Yan looked down at Yi Xian. Yi Xian grinned. "It's good to be alive." With that said, he burrowed his head into Tuoba Yan's arms. It was very soft. Although there was a bloody smell, there was a faint body fragrance mixed with the smell of blood. Tuoba Yan's body trembled slightly. In the next moment, she pushed Yi Xian away, got up, and left. Yi Xian quickly stood up and walked to Tuoba Yan. Then, he took out a small wooden figurine and handed it to Tuoba Yan. The wooden figurine was 90% similar to Tuoba Yan's. Yi Xian smiled. "I carved it." Tuoba Yan glanced at the wooden figurine and said nothing. Yi Xian stuffed the wooden figurine into Tuoba Yan's hand. Then, he turned and walked toward the Ning Kingdom cavalry 1,000 feet away. Tuoba Yan looked at the wooden figurine in his hand and said nothing. Yi Xian came to a group of Ning Kingdom cavalry. Most of these Ning Kingdom cavalry were injured. Yi Xian bowed deeply to the cavalry. The Ning Kingdom cavalry looked puzzled. Yi Xian said, "On behalf of all the people and soldiers of the state of Jiang, I thank you for your support from thousands of miles away. I, Yi Xian, and the state of Jiang will remember this kindness." As he spoke, he took out a storage ring. "There are 200 million gold coins in this storage ring. Consider it my treat to everyone." With that said, he pointed his finger and the storage ring flew to Tuoba Yan not far away. Tuoba Yan looked at the storage ring in front of him in a daze. 200 million gold coins. This was not a small number. In the distance, countless Ning Kingdom cavalry suddenly cheered. "State warrior Yi is righteous. State warrior Yi is righteous." In an instant, these Ning Kingdom soldiers' favorable impression of Yi Xian skyrocketed. No matter how many words of gratitude they said, it was better to do something practical. If these 200 million gold coins were distributed like this, these Ning Kingdom cavalry would get at least a year's worth of military pay. How could they not be excited? After Yi Xian gave out the storage ring, he cupped his fists to the Ning Kingdom soldiers in the field. "Everyone, see you later." With that said, he leaped and flew to the back of the black wolf not far away. Soon, he disappeared into the distant night. In the night, Tuoba Yan tightly held the wooden figurine and storage ring in his hand. Yi Xian returned to Kaiyang City. On the ground, there were corpses and blood everywhere. Some belonged to the Chu Kingdom cavalry, and some belonged to the Jiang Kingdom soldiers. At first glance, it was a shocking sight. War had always been cruel. Not far away, Mo Yunqi walked to Yi Xian and pointed to some corpses not far away. "They are all from Azure Billow Academy. I counted, 11 people died." 11 people. Yi Xian walked to the dozen corpses. Looking at them, Yi Xian remained silent for a long time. A moment later, Yi Xian said softly, "Bring them back to the academy and bury them in the Cemetery of Heroes. Every year on this day, all the students and teachers will pay their respects. Their loved ones will be worry-free for the rest of their lives. Old Mo, you will be responsible for this." Mo Yunqi nodded. "Don't worry, I will do it well." Yi Xian bowed deeply to the dozen corpses. "I am proud of all of you. Azure Billow Academy will also be proud of all of you. Mo Yunqi's eyes instantly became moist. No one wanted people to die, but people were going to die in war. Yi Xian lightly patted Mo Yunqi's shoulder. Then, he walked to a place not far away. Not far away, there was a group of horses gathered. They were the Black Flame horses. These horses did not leave but were guarding the fallen Black Flame cavalrymen. On the ground, there were over 100 Black Flame cavalrymen lying on the ground. Over 100 sets of top-notch equipment. The reason why these Black Flame cavalrymen were so powerful, other than their individual strength, it was also because of their equipment. These equipment were all bright rank. Even if the country of Jiang exhausted all of its resources, it still wouldn't be able to afford it. It was too precious. Yi Xian kept the equipment on the ground. Not only did he want Azure Billow Academy to be equipped with the best equipment, he also wanted to create a cavalry. A cavalry that was even stronger than the Black Flame cavalry. Only with sufficient strength would they not be bullied by others. At this moment, at the end of the horizon, a group of soldiers appeared. Zhang Jiu. Zhang Jiu brought a group of Jiang soldiers and arrived before Yi Xian. She quickly walked towards Yi Xian. We killed over 20,000 Chu soldiers. Yi Xian gently wiped off the bloodstain on Zhang Jiu's face. We won. On the battlefield, countless Jiang soldiers roared in unison. Jiang State won. The group of Azure Billow Academy's students also roared in unison. After this battle, these students had undergone some transformations. 1 hour later, before the shattered walls of Mizar City, there were countless corpses lying below the walls. There were at least 20,000 of them. All of them were the corpses of Jiang State soldiers. Some of them were intact, some were damaged, and some were very old, and some were very young. Yi Xian and the others stood before the corpses, and the atmosphere was very heavy. After an unknown period of time, Yi Xian suddenly said, "Bow." Everyone present bowed deeply, including Yi Xian. These soldiers who sacrificed themselves for the country deserve to be bowed by everyone in Jiang State. Yi Xian turned to face everyone before him. Remember, the greatest people of Jiang State are buried here. All of them should be remembered by the people of Jiang State. As he spoke, he pointed at the group of soldiers. Every single one of them is a kingdom scholar of Jiang State. The eyes of all the Jiang State soldiers were filled with tears. Respect. In the past, soldiers actually didn't have a high status because this was a world of martial artists. For example, in the Karaki Academy, the students of Karaki Academy were born to be superior to others. There were also those so-called monstrous geniuses. As for soldiers, how many people respected them? But at this moment, Yi Xian respected them. This feeling of being respected and valued caused some of the soldiers present to be unable to restrain themselves from shedding tears. Zhang Jiu looked at Yi Xian with a trace of complicated emotions in his eyes. Yi Xian felt complicated as well. He had risen up from the bottom. When he was in Azure City, before he became the prince, did the clan care about their lives every time they went out? No. Most of the time, those in power only cared about benefits and results. Soldiers should be respected. Yi Xian suddenly turned to Zhang Jiu. Pick some people for me, around 70 people. I want to establish a Dao soldier. Chapter 173. Dao Soldiers. After witnessing the Dao soldiers of Karaki Academy and Dark World, Yi Xian had an idea. That was to establish a Dao soldier belonging to Azure Billow Academy. Previously, after seeing the Black Flame Cavalry, he was even more certain of this idea. Azure Billow Academy must have its own powerful Dao soldier. Now he had the equipment. Although he did not have much money, he would have it soon. He only lacked people. Naturally, he would select people from the army. These soldiers had rich combat experience. As long as they were nurtured, they would definitely become elites that could defeat 100 in the future. Zhang Jiu nodded. All right, I will select the people. At this moment, Lu Jioga arrived in front of Yi Xian and Zhang Jiu in her wheelchair. Both of them looked at Lu Jioga. Lu Jioga took out a map and pointed at it. Previously, I had the king lead troops to support Marshal Lin Shao. The Chu kingdom has suffered a great defeat. I believe the Yu kingdom has also retreated. Great Cloud Empire's Black Flame cavalry was completely annihilated. In a short period of time, they would not dare to easily offend us. This is a golden opportunity for our state of Jiang. Jiang Jiu said in a deep voice. Annihilate Chu state? Lu Joga smiled. Naturally. If we don't annihilate them now, when? Jiang Jiu shook his head. Although our state of Jiang won, it was a Pyrrhic victory. If another war breaks out. As she spoke, she glanced at the soldiers in the field. Most of the soldiers were already covered in wounds. Lu Joga smiled. I understand your highness worries. To annihilate these two countries, we do not need an army. One person is enough. One person. Jiang Jiu was stunned, then looked at Yi Xian. Lu Joga looked at Yi Xian. State scholar Ye's name has spread throughout Azure province. From today onwards, the experts of Myriad Law Realm and above will not dare to make a move. State scholar Yi should grasp such a good opportunity. Yi Xian shook his head. I alone cannot annihilate two countries. Lu Joga raised the corner of his mouth and did not speak. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly said, I understand. After speaking, he looked at Jianji and the other two. The three of you bring the students back to Azure Billow Academy. The three of you will be responsible for the Academy's affairs. Mo Yunqi smiled bitterly. Bandit Yi, we've just finished fighting. Let's take a break. Yi Xian walked to the front of Mo Yunqi and extended his right hand. There are dozens of people from Tsonglan Academy. Are you going to support them? The corner of Mo Yunqi's mouth twitched. He took a step back. Fine, pretend I didn't say anything. Yi Xian kicked Mo Yunqi. Get lost. Mo Yunqi snickered, turned around, and ran. Jianji walked in front of Yi Xian. Be careful. After saying that, she turned around and left. However, she didn't take 2 steps before she suddenly returned to Yi Xian. She took out a storage ring and placed it in Yi Xian's hand. Then, she turned around and left. This time, she didn't look back. Yi Xian took a look at the storage ring, and when he saw what was inside, he was stunned. Mantu. Steamed bun. Chicken drumstick. The storage ring was filled with these 3 items. Most importantly, there were quite a lot of them. There were at least a few hundred steamed buns, a few hundred steamed buns, and 1,000 chicken drumsticks. Oh my god! Yi Xian was dumbfounded. Bai Zhe patted Yi Xian's shoulder lightly. Go home early. After saying that, he turned around and left. The Tsonglan Academy students came to Yi Xian. Everyone bowed in unison. Take care, Dean. After saying that, everyone turned around and left. However, there was one person who stayed behind. Yi Xian. Yi Xian walked in front of Yi Xian. She lowered her head slightly, but soon, she plucked up her courage and looked at Yi Xian. I just killed 41 people. I killed the most. After saying that, she clenched her 2 small hands tightly. There was some excitement in her eyes. Yi Xian smiled. Impressive. After saying that, he opened his palm. A supreme-grade spiritual weapon appeared in front of Yi Xian. This is your reward. Yi Xian was stunned. Yi Xian smiled. You don't like it? Yi Xian hurriedly took that supreme-grade spiritual weapon. This supreme-grade spiritual weapon was a dagger. It was very small and exquisite. It was the most suitable weapon for Yi Xian. Yi Xian was obviously very fond of it. She caressed it again and again. Yi Xian said softly, after going back, cultivate well. Only when your strength is strong can you live a better life. Yi Xian nodded her little head. She hesitated for a while and then said softly, when there's no one around, can I call you cousin? Cousin. Yi Xian was slightly stunned. In the blink of an eye, he smiled and said, sure. Yi Xian was stunned. Obviously, she did not expect Yi Xian to agree. She immediately hugged Yi Xian. Her tears flowed uncontrollably. Cousin. Yi Xian's heart was rather complicated. Yi family. He was becoming more and more unfamiliar with this family. After a while, Yi Xian and the Tsonglan Academy students had already left. Yi Xian did not linger. After bidding farewell to Zhang Jiu, he also left. After watching Yi Xian completely disappear in the distance, Zhang Jiu withdrew his gaze. Beside Zhang Jiu, Lu Joga suddenly said, he's very outstanding. Zhang Jiu looked at Lu Joga. Lu Joga smiled slightly. Your Highness, he's growing very quickly. In another year, he might have already gone to the divine central continent. At that time, will your highness be able to keep up with his footsteps? Zhang Jiu said softly. What are you trying to say, State Preceptor Lu? Lu Jioga said softly. Your highness is a smart man. You should know what I mean. Zhang Jiu was silent. At this moment, Lu Jioga suddenly took out a thick black book. The military manual contains 72 battle strategies of my school. It also has the effect of evolving the battlefield. With a single thought, the battle situation can automatically evolve in your mind. Countless endings can be imagined in your mind. In addition, there is also the military school's supreme cultivation method, military tactics. In addition, there are also martial arts techniques. As she spoke, she looked at Lu Jioga. If you agree to my school's successor outside the city, from this moment on, I will be your Dao protector. Dao protector. Zhang Jiu frowned slightly. Military school? Lu Jioga smiled. Military school. Only by joining my school will you be able to lead Dao soldiers, immortal soldiers, and even legendary soul soldiers, or even existences above them. Zhang Jiu looked deeply at Lu Jioga. Who exactly are you? Lu Jioga lightly tapped her legs with both hands. A cripple. Come with me. With that, she turned and left. Zhang Jiu was silent for a moment, then followed. The news of the battle at Mizar City quickly spread throughout the Azure province. The entire Azure province was shocked. The Black Flame army was completely annihilated. When they received this news, countless people were shocked. This was the Black Flame army, the most powerful cavalry in the entire Azure province. And then it was all gone. Yi Xian. Yi Xian's name spread like the plague, quickly spreading throughout the Azure province. Of course, there was another reason why Yi Xian's name spread so quickly. It was because Yi Xian was now the swordmaster. A swordmaster who was not even 20 years old. Not to mention in the Azure province, even in a place like the divine central continent, he would be considered a top monster. As Yi Xian's fame rose, some matters of the past were also dug up. For example, Yi Xian's expulsion from Xueqi College. Now, Xueqi College in the entire Azure province had become a laughingstock. As for the protagonist, Yi Xian had arrived at the imperial capital of Chu. At this moment, the people of Chu were in a state of panic. The 100,000 cavalrymen of Chu were defeated, and less than 30,000 returned. After suffering such a heavy blow, Chu no longer had any confidence. Especially now that Xueqi College and the Great Cloud Empire seemed to have disappeared. Without the backing of Xueqi College, Dark World, and the Great Cloud Empire, could Chu resist Jiang? Would the kingdom of Jiang give up? The entire Chu was in a panic. In the imperial palace of Chu, the monarch of Chu sat on the dragon throne in the main hall. Below him were the ministers of Chu. The monarch of Chu had a cold expression. What? Are you all mute? Below him no one spoke. The monarch of Chu suddenly stood up and said angrily, You are all good-for-nothings. Is Zhang Guojiu so terrifying? Did he make you lose your courage? Suddenly, a guard rushed into the main hall in panic. A man has appeared at the entrance of the palace. He calls himself Yi Xian. Yi Xian. Everyone's expression changed drastically. The monarch of Chu slumped down on the dragon throne, and his face was extremely pale. The ministers of Chu had extremely unsightly expressions on their faces as well. It should be said that they were terrified. They'd heard how Yi Xian had treated Tang in the past. He was a homicidal maniac. Is he here to slaughter the imperial family of Chu? At this moment, a man suddenly appeared at the entrance of the main hall. The man's eyes were slightly closed and he wore an ink-white robe. On his robe, there was still fresh blood that had yet to dry. In his hand, there was a sword that was slowly dripping with fresh blood. Yi Xian. After Yi Xian arrived in Chu, he directly headed for the imperial palace. Along the way he killed many people. When the soldiers of Chu learned of his name, they didn't dare to block his path. Hence, his journey from the outside of the palace to the main hall could be considered as smooth sailing. Seeing Yi Xian, the ministers retreated one after another. Their eyes were filled with fear. Only a few generals didn't retreat, but their eyes were also filled with dread. On the dragon throne, the monarch of Chu stared fixedly at Yi Xian. His fists were clenched tightly, and they were trembling slightly. Yi Xian raised his sword and slowly walked to the front of the monarch. He raised his head and faced the monarch. "Let me introduce myself. My name is Yi Xian, and I'm from Jiang country. I'm the current dean of Zhonglan Academy." "Impudent!" Not far away, a general suddenly roared in anger. "Yi Xian, this is the imperial palace of Chu. How dare you be so impudent? You—" The general's voice stopped abruptly, because a sword had been inserted between his brows. The general's eyes were wide open. Fresh blood slowly flowed out from between his brows, and in an instant, his face was dyed red. Subsequently, his entire body fell to the ground. Everyone present was stunned. Yi Xian opened his right hand, and the sword suddenly flew out from between the general's brows. When it reappeared, it was already in Yi Xian's palm. Yi Xian shook his head. "I respect your backbone and courage. But it's time for me to speak. Please give me some face. Otherwise, I'll make all of you speechless for the rest of your lives." After he finished speaking, he slowly walked towards the monarch of Chu. At this moment, an old man appeared behind the monarch. A Dharma realm expert. Yi Xian pointed the spirit elegant sword at the Dharma realm expert. "If you don't want Chu country to perish, then get lost." The old man stared fixedly at Yi Xian, and his eyes were filled with dread. This was because the cause of Li Mu's death had spread throughout the entire Qingzhou. Yi Xian walked in front of the monarch of Chu. Just as the monarch was about to speak, Yi Xian suddenly slashed out with his sword. The monarch of Chu's eyes widened, and he stared fixedly at Yi Xian. Yi Xian grabbed the monarch of Chu's hair with his left hand, and with a light lift, the monarch's head was lifted up. Yi Xian kicked the monarch of Chu's corpse away. He sat on the dragon throne, and he placed the bloody head on the table in front of him. "Now, let's talk about the compensation, especially the compensation for my mental distress. This is a big issue, and we need to discuss it properly. Everyone. P.S. Don't go away." Chapter 174. The hall was deathly silent, and it was deathly still. Dead. The monarch of Chu had died just like that. Some of the weaker ministers of Chu had already collapsed to the ground, while the others were trembling uncontrollably. Only a few of them were able to maintain their composure. Behind Yi Xian, the old man's face was extremely gloomy. He was the only one who had the ability to kill Yi Xian, but he did not dare to do so. Firstly, if he did, he would most likely die first. Li Mu was the best outcome. He was a Dharma defensive realm expert. Secondly, if he did, Yi Xian might vent his anger on the citizens of Chu. By then, all the citizens of Chu would suffer. He could not do it. The old man slowly closed his eyes. Finally, he sighed. Chu was now a piece of meat on the chopping board of Jiang. Jiang could cut it however he wanted. Yi Xian faced the ministers of Chu. "Send a representative." No one dared to step forward. Yi Xian shrugged. "Then kill them all." The ministers of Chu were shocked when they heard Yi Xian's words. At this moment, a hunchbacked old man walked out. The old man stopped not far from Yi Xian. He looked at Yi Xian without any fear in his eyes. "Old man, Grand Tutor of Chu, Li Shi." Yi Xian nodded. "I only have a few conditions. Listen carefully. If you don't agree, we'll get someone else to speak." As he spoke, he placed the Lingxiu sword on the table. "Firstly, I want to take away all the treasures in Chu's treasury. Secondly, Chu has to compensate Jiang country 500 million gold coins every year. Thirdly, Chu has a city called Northern City. This city is quite close to Jiang country. In the future, it will belong to Jiang country. Do you have any problems with these three conditions?" As soon as Yi Xian finished speaking, the expressions of the ministers of Chu turned extremely ugly. Take away all the treasures in Chu's treasury? With this, the Chu country had become a poor country. In addition, the Chu country had to compensate 500 million gold coins every year. This was akin to raising the Chu country like a sheep. The most important thing was the northern city. This city was the second largest city in the Chu country, second only to the imperial capital of the Chu country. Not only that, this city had a natural geographical advantage. To the south, it could defend against the Jiang country and the Ning country. To the back, there was a natural barrier. This was because on both sides of the northern city, there was a vast river. If the Zhang kingdom were to obtain this city, it would be equivalent to grabbing the throat of the Chu kingdom. Li Shi was so angry that his body was trembling. He glared at Yi Xian and said, "You might as well destroy my Chu country." Yi Xian abruptly stood up and kicked the head of the Chu emperor towards Li Shi. He leaned forward and laughed evilly. "Destroy your Chu country? You think I don't want to? You think I can't do it? I didn't destroy your Chu state because I didn't want more soldiers of my Zhang state to die." As he spoke, he walked in front of Li Shi. "Also, please remember, the war was not started by my Zhang country, it was started by your Chu country." Li Shi clenched his fists tightly. "Don't you think doing this is too cruel?" The corners of Yi Xian's mouth curled up into a mocking smile. "Cruel? If your Chu country were to attack my Zhang country, would you talk about being cruel to my Zhang country? No, I wouldn't. If your Chu country were to attack my Zhang country, countless citizens of my Zhang country would die, and they would die very miserably." As he spoke, he turned around and walked back to the dragon throne. "I'm not a person who's easy to talk to, especially when it comes to your Chu country. I don't want to waste my breath. Whether you can or not, it's just a matter of a single word." As soon as he finished speaking, the spirit-elegant sword on the table in front of Yi Xian suddenly trembled slightly. The hall fell silent once more. A threat. Yi Xian was blatantly threatening him without the slightest bit of concealment. Li Shi's body was trembling. Agree? If he agreed, the vitality of the Chu country would be greatly damaged, and it would become a third-rate country. If he didn't agree, the murderous devil in front of him would definitely spill blood in the hall. Yi Xian definitely dared to do it, and he had the strength to do it. No one doubted this. "My Chu country agrees." At this moment, a voice suddenly came from outside the hall. Everyone turned around and saw a woman in her 20s standing at the entrance of the hall. If this chapter is not finished, please turn the page. She was wearing a gorgeous palace dress with floral patterns. Upon seeing the woman, the ministers of Chu all bowed in unison. First princess of the Chu kingdom, Chu Chaohan. Under everyone's gaze, Chu Chaohan slowly walked up to Yi Xian and looked straight at Yi Xian. "My Chu country agrees to your 3 conditions." Yi Xian nodded. "Bring me to the treasury of Chu." Chu Chaohan turned to leave. Just like that, under Chu Chaohan's lead, Yi Xian arrived at the Chu kingdom's treasury. Yi Xian didn't even look at them, and just stored them all in the World Prison Pagoda. From start to finish, Chu Chaohan did not speak a single word. Chu Chaohan slowly followed Yi Xian out of the treasury. At the entrance, Yi Xian raised his head and looked down. Below him, there were tens of thousands of Chu soldiers. In the eyes of these soldiers, there was fear and dread, but also anger and resentment. Yi Xian shook his head with a smile. "I'm not afraid of your revenge. Not in the slightest." Finishing his words, he slowly walked into the distance. At the start, there were 2 soldiers who did not give way, but in the next moment, their heads were sent flying. In an instant, the group of Chu soldiers was about to make a move. At this time, Chu Chaonan, who was not far away, suddenly roared, "Retreat!" The group of soldiers looked at Chu Chaonan. Chu Chaonan gave them a cold glance. "All of you, retreat. Those who disobey will have their families executed." The group of soldiers unwillingly retreated to the sides, opening up a path. Yi Xian walked into the distance. Suddenly, he stopped. At this time, a sword was pressed against Chu Chaonan's forehead. Chu Chaonan was expressionless, and there was not the slightest ripple in his eyes. The surrounding soldiers were enraged, ready to make a move at any time. Yi Xian suddenly said, "I don't want Zhang's soldiers to get involved in the war. You're a smart woman. You should know what to do to let Chu live longer." Chu Chaonan stared at Yi Xian. "Don't worry. Before you die, Chu's soldiers will not take half a step into Zhang's territory." Yi Xian nodded. "You're frank enough. Remember your words. While I'm alive, if Chu makes any moves, things won't be as simple as today." Finishing his words, he quickly walked into the distance. On both sides, none of the Chu soldiers dared to move. In front of the treasury, Chu Chaonan slowly closed his eyes. At this time, the myriad law realm old man from the Great Hall appeared beside Chu Chaonan. Chu Chaonan said softly, "Has Karaki College and Great Cloud Empire not replied?" The old man shook his head. Chu Chaonan's expression instantly turned cold. Xueqi College and Great Cloud Empire. The moment Chu's soldiers were defeated, Chu had sought reinforcements from Xueqi College and Great Cloud Empire. This was because Chu knew that Jiang wouldn't let this matter rest. However, Xueqi College and Great Cloud Empire didn't reply at all. The old man sighed. That day, the old man didn't agree to attack Jiang. Xueqi College and Great Cloud Empire won't treat Chu as an ally. They're just making use of Chu. Unfortunately, the king doesn't listen. Sigh. Chu Chaonan sneered. Don't worry. They will suffer the same fate as Jiang today. As she spoke, she looked in the direction where Yi Xian had left. This person will seek revenge for the smallest grievance. He won't let Xueqi College and Great Cloud Empire off. The old man nodded. That day, Jiang's Xueqi College drove this person away. How foolish. Chu Chaonan slowly closed his eyes. It's Jiang's fortune to have such a person. After leaving Chu, Yi Xian didn't return to Jiang. Instead, he went to Yu. He alone wouldn't be able to destroy Chu and Yu. Even if Jiang attacked with all its troops, it wouldn't be able to destroy these two countries in a short period of time. Moreover, even if they were destroyed, Jiang's strength would be greatly damaged. Moreover, there was still Xueqi College and Great Cloud Empire. Therefore, sending troops now would be disadvantageous to Jiang. However, it was impossible to let Chu and Yu off just like that. Therefore, he thought of the same thing as Lu Joga. Let the two countries recover first. If this chapter isn't finished, please continue to the next page. The two countries wouldn't be able to recruit soldiers for at least 10 years. This was the reason why he came to plunder them. After he looted them, the two countries would definitely suffer a great loss. Jiang could take this opportunity to develop vigorously. With this, Jiang would become stronger and stronger. Apart from that, Songlan College also needed to develop. And development, you need to spend money. Especially now that he wanted to build a Dao soldier. One could imagine how much money was needed to build a Dao soldier. Yu State. One day later, Yi Xian arrived at Yu State. Just like Chu State, Yu State was in a panic after knowing that Xueqi College and Great Cloud Empire were defeated. Obviously, they were afraid of Jiang State's revenge. Yu State's Imperial Palace. At this moment, the Yu State's Imperial Palace was heavily guarded. Because Yu State already knew about what happened in Chu State. In the Imperial Palace, the king of Yu State sat on the dragon throne. Dozens of Yu State's ministers stood in front of him. The Imperial Palace was very quiet and the atmosphere was heavy. The king of Yu State glanced at the crowd. No one wants to say anything? A Yu State's minister stood up. I will live and die with Yu State. Countless ministers saluted in unison. We are willing to live and die with Yu State. Live and die with them. The king of Yu State smiled. Fortunately, the ministers of Yu State have more backbone than the ministers of Chu State. Don't worry, even if the sky falls, I will support it. At this moment, a guard suddenly ran into the imperial palace. Reporting to the king, Yi Xian is here. He has killed more than 100 people. Yi Xian. The expressions of all the ministers instantly changed when they heard this. The king of Yu State spoke indifferently. Send down the order. Don't resist and let him in. The guard was slightly hesitant. The king of Yu State smiled. Do as I say. The guard hesitated for a moment, and then he turned around and left. A short moment later, Yi Xian walked into the imperial palace with a sword in his hand, and the sword in his hand was still bleeding. Everyone present was looking at Yi Xian, the youngest swordmaster in the Azure Prefecture. The king of Yu State sized up Yi Xian and smiled, as expected of the youngest swordmaster in the Azure Prefecture. The elegance of a swordsman is obvious. Yi Xian stopped moving. Right at this moment, a man suddenly appeared outside the imperial palace. The man was around the age of 20, wore a white robe, and had a similar appearance to the king of Yu State. There was a young man behind the man. The young man wore green clothes and held a jade pendant in his hand. The white-robed man walked over to the king of Yu State and bowed deeply. Imperial father. The king of Yu State frowned and said angrily, What are you doing back here? Who notified you? The man shook his head. How can I not return when my country is in trouble? As he spoke, he turned around and gazed at the green-clothed man who stood nearby. The green-clothed man gazed at Yi Xian. You're from the Azure Prefecture's Zhonglan Academy? Yi Xian nodded. The green-clothed man withdrew a command token. Do you recognize this? The Zhonglan token. Yi Xian frowned. The green-clothed man walked over to Yi Xian with a rather arrogant expression. I'm the head disciple of the outer court of Zhonglan Academy in the Central Divine Prefecture. Now, I order you to leave the state of Yu State immediately. You. The green-clothed man's voice stopped abruptly, because a sword was pressed against the center of the green-clothed man's forehead. Everyone here was stunned. Yi Xian shook his head. Head disciple? I'm even the dean. Am I too arrogant? P.S. It's all out. He had only returned to Beijing yesterday, and it was already night time when he returned. I wrote until 4 in the morning. Of course, compared to before, the outburst this time is much smaller, only 6 chapters. However, during this period of time, I really have no other choice. I've really tried my best. You can scold me all you want, as long as you don't involve my family, really. Also, for the next few days, there will be double monthly votes. Voting for 1 monthly vote is equivalent to voting for 2. Please support me. End of this chapter. Chapter 175. It was deathly silent in the hall. Everyone was stunned. He didn't even give face to Zhonglan Academy's General Institute? Wasn't Yi Xian from Zhonglan Academy? Everyone was completely dumbfounded. It wasn't just them. Even the azure-clothed man and the white-robed man were dumbfounded. He was the crown prince of the Chu kingdom who'd always been gaining experience outside. He'd made a trip to the divine central continent and gotten to know this azure-clothed man. The Yu kingdom was in trouble this time, and since Yi Xian was from Zhonglan Academy, he'd specially invited this azure-clothed man. Yi Xian was from Zhonglan Academy, so he had to give face to Zhonglan Academy of the divine central continent, right? However, he realized that he'd made the wrong decision. The azure-clothed man stood before Yi Xian and looked at Yi Xian in horror. Even though Yi Xian had taken him by surprise and caught him off guard, he shouldn't have been unable to fight back. There was only one possibility, and that was that Yi Xian's strength far surpassed his. When he thought up to this point, the azure-clothed man put away his contempt and arrogance and said in a low voice, "We're both students of Zhonglan Academy." Yi Xian smiled and said, "I'm from Zhonglan Academy, but it's different from your Zhonglan Academy. This matter is between me and the Yu kingdom. Don't speak out of turn, understand?" The azure-clothed man gazed at Yi Xian. "You don't recognize the General Institute." Yi Xian chuckled. "It was the General Institute that didn't recognize us first." The azure-clothed man wanted to say something, but Yi Xian suddenly thrust his sword forward. Hiss! The sword pierced half an inch into the azure-clothed man's forehead, and blood flowed out. The azure-clothed man's pupils constricted, and he was extremely shocked. Yi Xian grinned. "I'll kill you if you say another word." The azure-clothed man took a deep look at Yi Xian, and then he turned and left. He hadn't said a single word, and he didn't dare say anything harsh, because he'd realized that Yi Xian really dared to kill him. Under such circumstances, saying anything harsh was undoubtedly an extremely stupid thing to do. Seeing that the green-robed man was about to leave, the white-robed man was shocked and hurriedly chased after him. "Brother Gu." The green-robed man stopped. "I'm sorry, I can't do anything." With that, he quickly disappeared into the distance. Peace was restored in the hall. Yi Xian turned and walked towards the Yu country's monarch. At this moment, some of the Yu country's ministers suddenly appeared in front of the Yu country's monarch. In the beginning there were only a few of them. But soon, more and more of them appeared in front of Yi Xian. In the eyes of the minister, there was fear and dread, but there was also the look of facing death with equanimity. In the territory of the Qing province, no one in the Dharma realm could stop Yi Xian. Yi Xian thought for a moment before looking at the king of Yu and saying, "You don't look like a fool. Why did you start this war?" The Yu country's monarch stood up and walked towards Yi Xian. At this moment, the white-robed man hastily stood in front of him. "Imperial father." The Yu country's monarch shook his head. He walked past the white-robed man and arrived in front of Yi Xian. "My Yu country doesn't have the strength to reject Xueqi College and Great Cloud Empire. Of course, it's also because of my greed. If we won the war and devoured Jiang country, our country's strength would surely increase greatly. Unfortunately, I didn't take you into account. Yi Xian nodded. Are you ready to pay the price? Yi Xian. Behind the king of Yu country, the white-robed man suddenly rushed in front of Yi Xian. He glared at Yi Xian. Don't go too far. Even if my Yu country dies, we... All of a sudden, Yi Xian thrust his sword at the white-robed man's throat. At this moment, countless Yu country soldiers rushed in. The main hall was instantly filled to the brim. Not only the main hall, but even the outside of the main hall was filled with Yu soldiers. A war was about to break out. Yi Xian suddenly pointed to the left with his left hand. 2 flying swords slashed out side by side. About 3 meters away, the heads of over 20 Yu country soldiers flew off. In the next instant, his left hand made a slash to his back. The 2 flying swords shuttled past. Behind Yi Xian, over 20 soldiers fell to the ground without any warning. The spectators were still in a daze. When Yi Xian was about to continue his attack, the Yu country's monarch suddenly said, "My Chu country admits defeat." As soon as the Yu country's monarch's voice faded, the 2 flying swords stopped at the throats of 2 Yu country soldiers. A thin layer of skin had been cut open. Cold sweat trickled down the foreheads of the 2 soldiers. If the Yu country's monarch spoke a little later, their heads would have flown off. Yi Xian lightly hooked his left hand, and the 2 swords flew back to his side. He faced the king of Yu. I believe you should already know the conditions I set out in Chu. Do you have any objections? Just as the king of Chu was about to speak, the white-robed man whom Yi Xian had pointed his sword at wanted to speak first. However, just as he opened his mouth, Yi Xian's sword had already pierced half an inch into his mouth. Chi! The space between the white-robed man's brows split open and blood seeped out slowly. Yi Xian grinned. One more time. His head will fall off. The white-robed man glared at Yi Xian. Clearly, he didn't want to admit defeat and was about to speak. At this moment, the Yu king suddenly pulled the white-robed man back and slapped him across the face. Pa! The slap was loud and clear. The king of Yu coldly looked at the white-robed man. Is there any meaning in trying to be brave at this time? The white-robed man's expression was somewhat malevolent. My Yu nation has so many soldiers, why do we need to fear him? Why not give it a try? The king of Yu shook his head, and his eyes were filled with disappointment. Was Yi Xian really alone? If Yi Xian was alone, the Yu nation wouldn't be afraid, even if he was a sword master. However, Yi Xian wasn't alone. He had a sword immortal behind him, the Jiang country, the drunken immortal in the Ning country. Once an all-out war broke out, the Chu country wouldn't be able to resist without Xueqi College, Dark World, and the Great Cloud Empire support. The king of Chu couldn't see this point, but Chu Chaohan understood it. Therefore, she allowed Yi Xian to demand without restraint. At this moment, if the Yu nation were to make a move, the Yu nation would undoubtedly be annihilated. The king of Yu suddenly said, "From this moment onwards, the crown prince will be stripped of his title. The crown prince will be succeeded by the third prince, Yu Ming. Senior Mo Yen will be the grand tutor and prime minister." The white-robed man was dumbfounded. Imperial father. The king of Yu state gently waved his hand, and a 10,000 laws realm expert appeared in front of the white-robed man. The white-robed man wanted to say something, but the 10,000 laws realm expert sighed. Crown prince, the king doesn't want you to die. After speaking, he grabbed the white-robed man's shoulder and disappeared from the hall. However, the Yu nation soldiers didn't retreat. They still surrounded Yi Xian, but no one dared to make a move. The king of Yu looked at Yi Xian with a complicated expression. The Jiang country is fortunate to have a talent like you. Yi Xian didn't say anything. The king of Yu smiled. One last question. Are your next targets Xueqi College, Dark World, or the Great Cloud Empire? Yi Xian nodded. The king of Yu laughed. Finally, he turned around and walked back to the dragon throne. He sat down and in the next moment, he drew a golden dagger from his waist and slit his throat. Chi! Blood splattered. Below, Yi Xian turned around and left. Genius 1 Second Remember website. Mobile version website. Chapter 176. The king of Yu must die. This was Yi Xian's stance. The Yu and Chu kingdoms had waged war against the Jiang kingdom, and countless soldiers of the Jiang kingdom had died in battle. The 2 kingdoms must pay the price. Yi Xian walked out of the main hall and headed straight for the Yu Kingdom's treasury. The main hall was filled with wails of grief. An hour later, Yi Xian left the Yu Kingdom's imperial palace. This time, Yi Xian didn't choose to leave on Black Wolf. Instead, he took the drunken Immortal Inn's cloud ship because he could check his treasures on the cloud ship. As for Xueqi Academy and the Great Cloud Empire in the Central Plains, he naturally wouldn't go there to throw his life away. The Jiang Kingdom might have won, but Xueqi Academy and the Dark World hadn't suffered much damage. Especially the Great Cloud Empire, whose overall strength was still there. He had to take it slow. His top priority now was to improve his strength and the strength of those around him. Moreover, he had to establish the Dao soldiers of Xueqi Academy. Yi Xian was the only guest on the entire cloud ship. This was a convenience that the drunken Immortal Inn had given him. In a luxurious private room, Yi Xian was sitting on the floor. At the moment, he was checking his treasures. He had obtained a lot of things after looting the Chu and Yu kingdoms. Among them, there were 4 billion gold coins. Including his own, he now had almost 6 billion gold coins. Apart from gold coins, there were more than 2 million supreme-grade spirit stones and 12 jade-grade spirit stones. Among them, there were a total of 25 earth-rank cultivation techniques, martial techniques, and movement techniques. In addition to the ones he'd accumulated in the past, he had around 35 in total. As for the supreme-grade spiritual weapons, he had obtained a total of 36 this time. In addition to his previous savings, he now had 85 supreme-grade spiritual weapons. Apart from that, there were also light-grade spirit weapons, but not many, only about 6. This time, he was lucky because there were 2 swords among them. Swords. Yi Xian brought the 2 swords in front of him. The 2 swords were different from the swift shadow sword. One of the swords was wider, and there was a lightning-like pattern on the blade. The hilt was pitch black, and it felt bone-chilling to the touch. The other sword was thinner, slightly longer, and both sides of the blade gave off a chilly glow. 2 light-grade low-grade swords. Devour? Yi Xian didn't hesitate and directly devoured it. As soon as the 2 swords entered his body, they turned into countless streams of energy and dispersed towards Yi Xian's limbs and bones. Nether Passage Realm. With his current strength, he wasn't strong enough to fight against the 10,000 laws boundary. However, if he reached the Divine Combination Realm, he would be able to fight against the 10,000 laws boundary. Even if he couldn't win, he wouldn't be unable to fight back. If he were to face tens of thousands of Dharma State experts right now, he would definitely be beaten up. He had to reach the Divine Unity Realm. As for the 2 swift shadow swords, he did not devour them because they were extremely useful to him now. They were not any weaker than the exquisite spirit sword. Now that he was facing an enemy, the 2 flying swords were very lethal. The 2 swords could be kept. Moreover, with his current wealth, he was entirely capable of finding even more swords from the Immortal Indulgence Inn in the future. Inside the cloud ship, Yi Xian was frantically devouring the energy within the bright stage. His aura was also growing, and the spirit elegant sword in his body was also trembling slightly as it continuously absorbed the energy. Outside. What Yi Xian had done in Chu and Yu had quickly spread throughout the entire Qing province. Now, Yi Xian's reputation was like the sun at high noon in the entire Qing province. And in Jiang country, Yi Xian's reputation had reached its peak. Every day, countless people would come to the foot of the mountain of Azure Billows Academy. Some wanted to enter Azure Billows Academy, while others wanted to meet Yi Xian. As for Dark World, Xueqi Academy, and Great Cloud Empire, ever since the battle at Mizar City, these 3 forces had not made any moves. One day later, the cloud ship arrived at Jiang country. After the cloud ship stopped, Yi Xian did not leave the ship. This chapter is not finished. Please continue to the next page. On the deck of the cloud ship, 2 delicate and pretty ladies were whispering. I saw that swordsman yesterday. How did he look? Very handsome. Even if he didn't come out after entering the box, we can't go in, sigh. Wow, look at your infatuated look. He's the sword master. Don't think too much. So what if he's the sword master? Why don't we drug him? Aya, you damned girl, don't you have any shame? Cough. A light cough came from behind the 2 ladies. The 2 ladies turned around and were shocked to see the person who came. In an instant, their faces turned red like the rosy clouds in the sky. They were extremely shy. The person who came was Yi Xian. Yi Xian walked down the ship. Just as he was about to disembark, he looked up at the sky with a face full of worry. Being too handsome is also a kind of trouble. After saying that, he jumped off the cloud ship. On the deck, the two ladies covered their faces in embarrassment. After Yi Xian got off the ship, he went straight to Azure Billow's academy. He was still in the Nether Passage realm. Devouring the two swords did not help him reach the Divine Unity realm, nor did it help the Spirit Elegant sword. This made him quite disappointed. At the same time, he also realized that after he reached the Nether Passage realm, his requirements for swords were getting higher and higher, especially the Spirit Elegant sword. In order to reach the Truth middle grade, he had to devour countless bright grade swords. At first, he thought that it would be at most 4 or 5, but now it seemed that he was too naive. If he and the Spirit Elegant sword wanted to improve further, they would probably need at least 10 bright grade swords, or even more. At the thought of this, Yi Xian suddenly felt that he was very poor again. Not long after, Yi Xian entered the city. At this moment, the imperial capital was in a state of jubilation. The state of Jiang had won. When the armies of the state of Chu, state of Yu, Karaki Academy, and the Great Cloud Empire pressed down, the people of the state of Jiang were naturally terrified. Because if the state of Jiang perished, they would become slaves and their fates would be very tragic. And the state of Jiang had won. Looking at the jubilant people in the city, a smile appeared on Yi Xian's face. Protect the country? He did not think too much. He only knew that he, the soldiers of the state of Jiang, and the students of the Azure Billows Academy had fought to the death in Mizar City, allowing many people to survive. Responsibility. When he was young, his mother suddenly ran away. At that moment, looking at his petite sister, he felt a sense of responsibility for the first time. He had to protect his sister well. This was the responsibility of an elder brother. When he grew up, as the heir of the Yi family, he had an additional responsibility at that moment. To seek benefits for the family, to fight for the family. Although the family later abandoned him and his sister, he had never let down the Yi family. And now, he was the dean of the Azure Billows Academy, the state scholar of the state of Yi, and the big brother of Bai Zhe and Mo Yunqi. The responsibility had always been there, and it was getting bigger and bigger. And as a man, he should shoulder the responsibility that belonged to him. Tired? Yes, he would be very tired. But if he did not have a good family and a good father, if he was not tired, then he could only be a good-for-nothing. Thinking of this, suddenly, a sword intent emitted from Yi Xian's body. Yi Xian was stunned. This sword intent came out on its own. This sword intent has its own consciousness? Yi Xian was shocked by his own thoughts. Another thing was, since it was the good and evil sword intent, which meant that there was a good side, then there must be an evil side. But, what about the evil side? What was the power of the evil thought sword intent? This chapter is not finished. Please continue to the next page. Yi Xian was a little curious. Are you state scholar Yi? At this moment, a voice suddenly came from beside Yi Xian's ears. Yi Xian stopped and turned around. On his right, stood a lady holding a flower butterfly umbrella. The lady was beautiful and had an excellent figure. At this moment, the lady was sizing him up, her eyes filled with suspicion. As the lady's voice fell, the surrounding people also looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian said seriously, I am not state scholar Yi. State scholar Yi is handsome, dignified, talented, and elegant. His handsomeness is indescribable. How can I be state scholar Yi? I am not even 1/10,000th of him. The lady. After saying that, Yi Xian did not blush or pant. He turned around and walked into the distance. At this moment, the lady suddenly walked to Yi Xian's side. She took out a portrait. In the portrait, it was Yi Xian. The lady looked at the portrait, then turned to look at Yi Xian. She said softly, very similar. Yi Xian. At this moment, the lady suddenly stood in front of Yi Xian. She stared straight at Yi Xian. Are you? Yi Xian was a little helpless. What are you trying to do? Hearing Yi Xian's words, the lady's eyes lit up. You really are. As she said that, the umbrella in her hand suddenly closed. In the next moment, the umbrella in her hand was pointed at Yi Xian's forehead. Sword force. Sword intent. A grandmaster of the sword Dao. Yi Xian was shocked. This lady is actually a grandmaster of the sword Dao. Moreover, the umbrella in her hand is actually a sword at the true grade. No, it should be called an umbrella sword. Yi Xian didn't think too much about it. A sword intent suddenly blocked in front of him. Kindness sword intent. The kindness sword intent formed a thick shield that forcefully blocked the lady's umbrella sword. There was a trace of surprise in the lady's eyes when she saw Yi Xian's sword intent. What a strange sword intent. I've never seen it before. As soon as she said that, her lily-white hand spun lightly. The umbrella sword suddenly unfolded. Bang! Yi Xian was instantly blasted 30 meters away. But in the next moment, a flying sword pierced the lady's umbrella sword. Bang! The lady retreated repeatedly. This time, she retreated over 60 meters. After the lady stopped, she looked up at Yi Xian. There was a trace of excitement in her eyes. Sword Master. You've really become a sword master. Yi Xian spoke in a low voice. You were sent here by Xueqi Academy? The lady was slightly stunned, and then she shook her head. I'm Jian Chu from the Jian clan. My younger brother is Jian Xiaowang. You should know him, right? Jian Xiaowang? Yi Xian was stunned. He naturally knew her, because Jian Xiaowang and Gong Qingqing had helped him in the Ning Kingdom's secret realm. Jian Chu sized Yi Xian up and said, I was about to head to the Central Divine Prefecture, but I suddenly heard that you've become a sword master. So, I came to have a spar with you. You're very formidable, and I might not be able to defeat you now. Yi Xian smiled. You're not bad as well. Jian Chu walked over to Yi Xian and asked curiously, How did you become a sword master? Can you share your experience with me? Yi Xian was stunned. This fellow is asking me so openly? Isn't she afraid at all? Jian Chu blinked. Can I? Yi Xian thought for a moment, and then he said, Why don't you join my Azure Billow Academy? We can have an exchange in the Sword Dao in the future. What do you think? Jian Chu didn't even think about it and immediately nodded. All right. Yi Xian was speechless. P.S. I've just returned to Beijing. After I catch my breath, I'll wait until midnight. Does anyone have any objections? No. All right. Thank you very much for your understanding. I love all of you. End of this chapter. Chapter 177. Great. Yi Xian was stunned. She agreed just like that? Yi Xian wanted to confirm it, so he asked, Are you willing to join Songlan Academy? Jian Chu nodded. Yes. You are so powerful. I should be able to gain a lot by following you. However, if I am stronger than you one day, I will have to leave. Yi Xian smiled. Sure. Let's go back to Songlan Academy with me. Just like that, Songlan Academy had one more Sword Dao Grandmaster student. Of course, Yi Xian was very happy. Sword Dao Grandmaster. Moreover, from his previous exchange with Jian Chu, she was already at the peak of Sword Dao Grandmaster and could reach Swordmaster at any time. If Jian Chu reached Swordmaster, Songlan Academy would have one more super warrior. After Yi Xian brought Jian Chu back to Songlan Academy, he immediately gathered all the students. There were less than 30 students left in Songlan Academy. However, after the battle at Mizar City, they had matured a lot. In front of Songlan Palace, Yi Xian faced everyone. On his left and right were Bai Zai, Mo Yunqi, Ji Anji and Jian Chu who had just joined Songlan Academy. Yi Xian walked in front of the students. Stay alive, okay? Everyone was stunned. They didn't understand Yi Xian's meaning. Yi Xian said softly, Many of our brothers died in Mizar City. Everyone was silent. Yi Xian said, One of my brothers once said, If you are not strong enough, you will be beaten to death. That is what we deserve. Let me say this to all of you. This world isn't so beautiful. It is very cruel. If you are strong, it means you have a better chance of survival. From now on, all of you will double your daily cultivation. As he spoke, he opened his right hand and a bright grade spiritual artifact appeared in his hand. At the sight of this bright rank spirit weapon, many of the students were stunned. Yi Xian said, Do you want it? Everyone nodded. Yi Xian said, Do you want it? Sure, whoever reaches Divine Unity Realm first will have it. Divine Combination Realm. The expressions of some people instantly turned bitter. Because among them, there were some who were only in the levitation realm. At this time, Yi Xian continued, in addition to this, there will be an additional rule. There will be a test every month, and the top 3 will be rewarded with an Earth rank martial technique and cultivation technique. The first place will also be rewarded with an additional top-grade spirit weapon. As for the last person, he will be expelled from Zhonglan Academy. When they heard Yi Xian's words, everyone present was stunned. Mo Yunqi's group of 3 looked at Yi Xian as well. Expulsion from school? This was a very serious matter. Yi Xian said indifferently, there are rewards and punishments. What I said just now will be implemented from this moment on. Now dismiss. The expressions of all the students instantly became solemn when they heard this. Expulsion from school. Right now, the people of Jiang country were proud to be a student of Zhonglan Academy. If they were expelled, it would mean that all the glory would vanish into thin air. No one wanted to leave. In an instant, the hearts of all the students of Zhonglan Academy had tightened. After the students dispersed, Mo Yunqi walked over to Yi Xian's side and said softly, Bandit Yi, isn't this too cruel? Yi Xian shook his head. You've seen the Dao soldiers of Xueqi Academy, the 9th Mercenary Group, and the Black Flame Army of the Great Cloud Empire. How do you think our students compare to them? Mo Yunqi fell silent. Because there was no comparison at all. Yi Xian said softly, if we don't be cruel to them today, then our enemies will be even more cruel to them in the future. As for the 3 of you, Senior Mo, Senior Bai and Senior Anji, your strengths aren't sufficient, and there's quite a gap between you and the true monstrous geniuses of the Central Divine Prefecture. Work hard. I'll do my best to get all the resources all of you need. I only hope that when we look back in a very, very long time from now, all of our brothers will still be here. This chapter isn't finished. Please continue to the next page. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. Mo Yunqi's group of 3 remained silent. All of them had attained the Divine Combination Realm, and Jianji was at the Divine Combination Realm as well. However, this was utterly insufficient. There was a difference in strength amongst the Divine Combination Realm as well. The 3 of them really weren't very strong when it came to defeating the Central Divine Prefecture. A short moment later, Mo Yunqi spoke abruptly, let's double our cultivation as well. Bai Zhe nodded. Jianji just gnawed on his steamed bun and didn't say anything. Jian Chuchu spoke abruptly, the Great Cloud Empire is very formidable. The 3 of them gazed at Jian Chuchu, and then she spoke in a serious tone. I made some calculations just now. If Azure Billow Academy were to fight the Great Cloud Empire head-on, then Azure Billow Academy wouldn't have any chance of winning. Right, it seems like all of you have 2 more enemies, Xueqi Academy and the Dark World. If these 2 powers join the battle as well, then your chances of winning will be negative. Mo Yunqi spoke with slight displeasure. We won just now. Jian Chuchu gazed at Mo Yunqi with slight pity. You're so stupid. Mo Yunqi almost went berserk. Jian Chuchu said, if Yi Xian attains the Divine Combination Realm, then it means that a Dharma Realm expert will appear in the Central Divine Prefecture. The expressions of Mo Yunqi's group instantly changed when they heard Jian Chuchu. They'd actually forgotten that. The Dharma Realm. If Yi Xian's strength improved, then it meant that Xueqi Academy and the Dark World could dispatch Dharma Realm experts. At that time, how could Azure Billow Academy resist the Dharma Realm experts? After a while, the 3 of them turned and left. Cultivation. Cultivation that risked one's life. Whether it was the state of Jiang or Azure Billow Academy, they hadn't won yet. To put it more seriously, this was just the beginning. Because the Dharma Realm was the core combat power of these powers. Yi Xian arrived at the Martyr's Palace. He sat on the ground, and after a long silence he suddenly spoke softly. Old Ji, Azure Billow Academy is getting better and better. Don't worry, I'll lead everyone to better things. I'll also let Azure Billow Academy of the Central Divine Prefecture know that our state of Zhang's Azure Billow Academy isn't inferior to them at all. The Martyr's Palace was brightly lit, and only Yi Xian's murmur could be heard. After an unknown period of time, Yi Xian lay down in the palace and fell asleep. Early in the morning, a red sun slowly rose from the horizon, and all things awakened. Yi Xian had woken up. At this moment, a thick blanket had appeared on his body, and it even carried a faint fragrance. Yi Xian smiled slightly, folded the blanket, and put it aside. Then, he walked out of the martyr's palace. Sunlight shone down, and Yi Xian stretched lazily. He said with a smile, "Everything is so familiar." Yi Xian suddenly turned his head to look. In the distance, Zhang Jiu was walking toward him. He was still dressed in silver armor, and he was still as good-looking as ever. Zhang Jiu walked up to Yi Xian. "I've already chosen the people." Yi Xian nodded. "Take me to them." Zhang Jiu turned around and led Yi Xian to an open space. There were 70 or so people standing in front of Yi Xian. The oldest was in his 30s, and the youngest was in his 20s. All 70 people exuded a murderous aura. One look and one could tell that they were battle-hardened warriors. When they saw Yi Xian, the 70 people knelt on one knee. "Greetings, State Scholar Yi." The 70 people looked excited. They respected Yi Xian from the bottom of their hearts. At the side, Zhang Jiu sighed with emotion. Fortunately, Yi Xian had no evil intentions. Otherwise, it would be a piece of cake for him to topple the Zhang country's imperial family. Yi Xian's prestige in the Zhang country had already surpassed the Zhang country's imperial family. "Not far away," Yi Xian said. "Rise." The 70 people stood up and looked at Yi Xian with a trace of excitement in their eyes. Yi Xian said softly, "From now on, you are students of my Azure Billow Academy. If you are unwilling, you can step forward. I won't force you." Not a single person stepped forward. Yi Xian nodded slightly. "This chapter is not over. Please continue." He nodded slightly. "From now on, I will give you the best resources and the best equipment. I will make you the most elite Dao soldiers in the Azure Prefecture. Of course, the training you will undergo will be cruel, extremely cruel. Moreover, there will be an assessment every month. The bottom 3 will be directly eliminated." Directly eliminated. Everyone's expression gradually turned solemn. Yi Xian turned to Zhang Jiu. "Every month, I need 3 more soldiers to replace those who are eliminated." Zhang Jiu nodded. "All right." Yi Xian said again. "They will be released from the military. In the future, they may only listen to my orders." Zhang Jiu looked at Yi Xian and did not speak. Yi Xian said, "Is that all right?" Zhang Jiu was still silent. Yi Xian did not speak either. After a moment, Zhang Jiu said, "You don't trust us?" Yi Xian shook his head. "I have my own selfish motives. This Dao soldier is the foundation of my Azure Billow Academy. I want to control it. If you don't agree, I will look for someone else." After this cavalry was trained, it would definitely be very terrifying in the future. He did not want this cavalry to fall into the hands of others. This was what he prepared for Azure Billow Academy. Zhang Jiu said indifferently, "Don't worry. We will not touch this cavalry." After speaking, she turned and left. There was a trace of self-ridicule on the corners of her mouth. Yi Xian suddenly appeared before Zhang Jiu. Zhang Jiu looked at Yi Xian with a rather cold expression. "What?" Yi Xian said in a light voice. "Are you angry?" Zhang Jiu nodded. "I am unhappy in my heart." She was unhappy not because Zhang country could not touch this Dao soldier, but because she felt that Yi Xian did not trust her. Yi Xian smiled lightly. "I hope that you will lead this cavalry in the future." Zhang Jiu was stunned. Yi Xian said in a light voice, "Little Jiu, I do not want your imperial family to touch this cavalry. Because if you let them touch it, the purpose of this cavalry's existence might change. To put it bluntly, even if I am no longer around, Azure Billow Academy must have the strength to protect itself. And you, I trust you." Zhang Jiu went silent for a moment and said, "Don't worry. This cavalry only belongs to Azure Billow Academy. It will not belong to Zhang country's imperial family. Zhang country's imperial family does not have the qualifications to touch this cavalry. But if Zhang country is in trouble in the future, I hope that this cavalry will be able to defend Zhang country." Yi Xian nodded. "Of course. But if Zhang country's imperial family is in internal strife, then they will absolutely not participate." Zhang Jiu gazed at Yi Xian. "With both of us here, there won't be any chaos." Yi Xian smiled. "That's true." Zhang Jiu spoke in a low voice. "I will be training this cavalry from now on. Who do you intend to train them?" Yi Xian smiled. I already have someone in mind. Yi Xian and Zhang Jiu sat on chairs within a hall, and Feng Lan, Mo Yuan, and Lu Joga were standing before them. After a long time, Mo Yuan suddenly said, "You want the three of us to train this Dao soldier for you?" Yi Xian nodded. Mo Yuan spoke in a low voice. "Do you know that training a Dao soldier requires a huge amount of money?" Yi Xian replied, "I know. I'll deal with the money." Mo Yuan and Feng Lan gazed at Lu Joga because she was from the school of the militarist. Lu Joga pondered deeply for a moment, and then she gazed at Yi Xian. "I will let them cultivate a cultivation technique called the murderous energy technique. This cultivation technique is suitable for soldiers to cultivate, but it's extremely expensive. Just cultivating this cultivation technique for a single soldier would cost at least 50 million gold coins, and that's in addition to everything else." Yi Xian almost fainted when he heard that. 50 million. Meanwhile, Lu Joga said, "However, in the future, they will be one of the most terrifying Dao soldiers in the Azure continent. Of course, the precondition is that you're willing to spend the money." Yi Xian fell silent for a moment before he gritted his teeth. "Let's do it." End of this chapter. Chapter 178. Let's do it. Yi Xian knew that Songlan Academy's current strength was insufficient and had to improve. It was impossible for them to improve slowly because Karaki Academy, Great Cloud Empire, and Dark World wouldn't give them the chance to develop slowly. If they wanted to develop, they could only develop quickly. And rapid development required money. Lots and lots of money. Fortunately, he had already prepared the equipment for this Dao soldier. Otherwise, he would not be able to establish this Dao soldier. Even if he could establish it, it would be a mediocre one. Even so, he was still panicking. Because this cavalry would consume a lot of money. No, it would burn money. Zhang Jiu also had a grave expression. Even if the state of Zhang exhausted all its resources, it might not be able to support this cavalry. And Yi Xian had to support a group of Songlan Academy students. He couldn't rob them every day, right? Lu Joga glanced at Yi Xian. Songlan Academy must make a profit. Yi Xian faced Lu Joga, and Lu Joga said indifferently, "You want to support an academy by yourself? That is not realistic, and you can't do that. Songlan Academy is now a major faction in the state of Jiang and can make a profit." Yi Xian hurriedly asked, "How do we make a profit?" Lu Joga thought about it and said, "Think about it yourself." Yi Xian. Profit. After the meeting, Yi Xian brought Zhang Jiu to Songlan Palace. Mo Yunqi and the others were there. They were discussing how to make a profit. If Yi Xian was to bear the burden of the entire Songlan Academy, it would be impossible. They must make a profit. After discussing for a while, Jian Chuchu suddenly said, "Isn't this a very simple matter?" The crowd looked at Jian Chuchu. Jian Chuchu blinked her eyes and said, "First, we can collect tuition fees. We can collect tuition fees from the students, including their daily living expenses. Of course, we can waive the tuition fees for those who are poor, but we can't waive the tuition fees for those who have mines." Saying that, she raised two fingers. "Second, open up the Songlan Academy. The people of Jiang country, as long as they have the money, they can enter the academy to visit, and even watch the students cultivate. Apart from that, Songlan Academy's rear mountain is so big that it can be developed properly. Let's see if we can discover the existence of any spirit mine or the like. If there is, then Songlan Academy will be rich." Finished speaking, she raised another finger. "Thirdly, even if there isn't any at the back of the mountain, we can let the students of Songlan Academy search everywhere, go to those ownerless boundless mountain ranges to search. Once they find one, they can immediately occupy it and send people to excavate it." At this point she stopped. Yi Xian quickly said, Go on, go on." Jian Chuchu glanced at Yi Xian and said with a smile, "We can let the academy's students form teams to go down the mountain to gain experience. They can accept some mercenary missions and earn some cultivation fees. Firstly, they can train themselves. Secondly, they can increase the reputation of the Azure Billow Academy." Yi Xian nodded. Sure. Continue." Jian Chuchu's lips curled up slightly. "Do you know what makes the aristocratic families and the major forces the most?" Everyone shook their heads. The few of them were very ignorant. Although Zhang Jiu was the princess of the country of Zhang, she spent most of her time in the military camp and rarely understood these things. Jian Chuchu glanced at them and said seriously, "It's to collect protection fees." "Everyone," Jian Chuchu said, "we can collect a certain amount of protection fees from those aristocratic families and the major forces." Zhang Jiu frowned. "That's not good, right? This chapter is not finished. Please continue to the next page." Yi Xian also nodded. "It doesn't seem good," Jian Chuchu said. "Do you think it's bullying the weak?" Yi Xian and the others nodded. Jian Chuchu rolled her eyes. "All right. Let's change the method. You can work with them. Every year, as long as they pay a certain amount of money, you can let their disciples come to Zhonglan Academy to study. Of course, they won't be official students. They are just here to learn. If they perform well and are outstanding, Zhonglan Academy can turn them into official students. If you do this, those aristocratic families and the major forces will be very willing." Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, and then he looked at Mo Yunqi and the others. "What do all of you think?" Mo Yunqi thought for a moment, and then he said, "It's not impossible, but you have to control the degree. Otherwise, it might destroy the reputation of our Zhonglan Academy." Jian Chuchu nodded. "You have to control the degree. You can't be insatiably greedy. Moreover, you have to control the quota every year. There can't be too many. Only then will it seem precious." Yi Xian suddenly turned to Jian Chuchu. "I'll appoint you as the chief treasurer of Zhonglan Academy. You'll be in charge of all these things. How about it?" Jian Chuchu blinked. "Chief treasurer?" Yi Xian nodded. "You'll be in charge of keeping the money we earn. Of course, if Zhonglan Academy needs it, you'll have to use it. Understand?" Jian Chuchu thought for a moment, and then she said, "Are there any benefits?" Yi Xian nodded. "I'll spar with you and share my insights in the sword Dao with you. Besides that, you'll get 10% of the money you earn every year. How about it? 10%. Jian Chuchu's eyes instantly lit up. She could already see a lot of money waving at her. Yi Xian still wanted to say something. However, Jian Chuchu suddenly slammed her palm on the table. "Let's do it." Everyone was speechless. Just like that, Zhonglan Academy had another chief treasurer. Yi Xian turned to Ji Anji. "Anji, you'll be in charge of the internal affairs. You can recruit people. You'll be in charge of all the internal affairs of Zhonglan Academy. Of course, don't forget to cultivate." Ji Anji nodded. "Okay." Yi Xian asked again. "If there's any difficulty, you have to tell me at any time. Understand?" Ji Anji nodded again. "Okay." "What about me and Bai Zhe?" Mo Yunqi suddenly asked. Yi Xian thought for a moment, and then he said, "Old Mo, the two of you will form a small team. The main mission of this small team is to search for talents all over Qingzhou. Look for those especially outstanding talents. If you find them and they're willing, you can recruit them into Zhonglan Academy." Talents. If Zhonglan Academy wanted to grow stronger, besides improving his own strength, he also needed more talents. He might be strong, but it didn't mean that the entire Zhonglan Academy was strong. What he wanted to do was that even if he, Yi Xian, was not around in the future, Zhonglan Academy would still be strong. After the meeting was dismissed, everyone started to act. For Zhonglan Academy. Time was life now. They couldn't waste any of it. Because no one knew when Xueqi Academy, Great Cloud Empire, and Dark World would launch an attack. Yi Xian left Zhonglan Academy and arrived at Drunken Immortal Inn. Fifth Floor Master personally welcomed him. Looking at Yi Xian, the fifth building master said with a smile, "My young friend, congratulations." "Congratulations?" Yi Xian was stunned. Fifth Floor Master said, "Defeating Great Cloud Empire, Xueqi Academy, and Dark World." Yi Xian shook his head. Senior should know that they didn't lose. Zhonglan Academy and Jiang Country didn't win either. Fifth Floor Master glanced at Yi Xian and said softly, "Old man is relieved that young friend can understand this." Yi Xian said, "Senior, for the next period of time. This chapter is not finished. Please continue to the next page." During this period, Zhonglan Academy might have a large number of things to purchase from Drunken Immortal Inn. A lot. Fifth Floor Master pondered for a moment and said, Young friend, don't worry. I will mobilize all the resources in Azure Province to satisfy young friend. Moreover, we will give young friend the best price. The higher-ups have already said that we won't profit from doing business with young friend. Yi Xian cupped his fists. Many thanks. This gratitude came from the bottom of his heart. Without Drunken Immortal in support, Songlan Academy's development speed would be much slower. Even if they had money, it would still be slower. Fifth floor master smiled. Young friend, you are too polite. Yi Xian said. Senior, there is one more thing. Are there any movements from Xueqi Academy, Dark World, and Great Cloud Empire? Fifth floor master shook his head. After the incident at Mizar City, Drunken Immortal sent people to investigate. However, there was no news. However, we can be sure that they won't leave the matter at that. Now that it has come to this, they won't rest until one side is dead. When he spoke up to this point, he seemed to have thought of something and said solemnly, Young friend, you must not casually attain the divine fusion realm right now. Yi Xian frowned. Why? Fifth floor master said in a low voice, if you attain the divine fusion realm, then they will be able to dispatch Dharma realm experts. If you don't attain the divine fusion realm now, then they won't dare to dispatch Dharma realm and Dharma controlling realm experts against you. If they don't dispatch Dharma realm and Dharma controlling realm experts, then no one in Azure Province can kill you. The number one expert beneath the Dharma realm. Under the circumstances that Enlancio wasn't here, Yi Xian was currently the number one expert beneath the Dharma realm in Azure Province. Yi Xian fell silent. I can't attain the divine fusion realm. After pondering deeply for a moment, Yi Xian nodded. All right. I can seize this opportunity to stabilize my cultivation and develop Songlan Academy at the same time. Fifth floor master nodded. Exactly. Young friend, your top priority now is to stabilize your cultivation and improve the overall strength of Songlan Academy. Also, young friend, you have to be wary of the Songlan Academy in the Central Plains. Yi Xian frowned slightly. Senior, do you mean that they might target Songlan Academy in the state of Jiang? Fifth floor master said. Previously, the state of Jiang's Songlan Academy was impoverished, so the Songlan Academy naturally looked down on it. But it's different now. The state of Jiang's Songlan Academy has such ferocious momentum. If it continues to develop like this, it will definitely become a superpower in the future, and they will definitely be jealous. Young friend, you must be careful. Don't let others harvest the fruits of your hard work. Yi Xian nodded slightly. I understand. It's fine if they don't have such thoughts. If they do, I don't mind having another enemy. Anyway, I already have enough. A few more won't make a difference. Fifth floor master shook his head and smiled bitterly. Yi Xian suddenly took out a gold card and placed it in front of fifth floor master. Senior, there are 500 million gold coins in this card. I need 5 special flying swords like Phantom Shadow. If there are more, you can keep them for me. Fifth floor master nodded. All right, I'll handle this matter. Yi Xian thanked him and bade farewell to fifth floor master. After leaving Drunken Immortal Inn, Yi Xian returned to Songlan Academy. But when he passed by a street, a black-robed elder suddenly blocked his way. He knew this elder. He was the black-robed elder who had been with Enlancio previously. The black-robed elder looked coldly at Yi Xian. You are extraordinarily lucky. Yi Xian said, Old man, I advise you to be kind-hearted. The black-robed elder sneered. Kind-hearted? Yi Xian, don't think that you can be cocky just because you have a sword immortal backing you. Old man, let me tell you. The Yin family is an aristocratic family with 10,000 years of history. Miss N has the bloodline of a martial god. A lowly sword immortal is nothing in their eyes. If you approach Miss N, you will only be courting your own destruction. P.S. I have let everyone down recently. I am willing to sacrifice my chrysanthemum for this. Come on. Be gay. End of this chapter. Chapter 179. A 10,000-year-old family? Yi Xian frowned. What the hell? The black-robed old man walked in front of Yi Xian and stared at Yi Xian. There are many accidents in a person's life. What do you think? As his voice fell, his right hand slowly clenched. A wave of power instantly enveloped Yi Xian. At this moment, on the right side of the street, an old man had appeared out of nowhere. The old man wore plain clothes and his long hair draped over his shoulders. He had a goatee. Seeing the plain-robed old man, the black-robed old man narrowed his eyes. A moment later, he coldly looked at Yi Xian and disappeared. The moment the black-robed old man disappeared, the plain-robed old man appeared in front of Yi Xian. The plain-robed old man sized up Yi Xian. There was a trace of surprise in his eyes, but this surprise soon turned into a complicated one. Yi Xian said, "Senior is from the An family?" The plain-robed old man said, "Yes." Yi Xian said seriously, "I think I'm quite outstanding. What does Senior think?" The plain-robed old man was stunned. In the next instant, he shook his head. "Your thick skin really surprises the old man, Yi Xian," the plain-robed old man said. "Do you know that my family values not only talent, but also bloodline and background? The battle at our level is not something you can imagine. Between aristocratic families, marriage alliances are common. The young miss is special. Very special. The person she chooses can't be an ordinary person. Do you understand?" Yi Xian was silent. He said it very bluntly. The plain-robed old man sized up Yi Xian. "To be honest, you aren't bad. But for my An family, it's not enough. It's far from enough. Because there are many geniuses like you in my An family. As for your background, you don't seem to have any. If we talk about the sword immortal behind you, forgive the old man for being blunt. My An family has 4 sword immortals." 4 sword immortals. The old man continued. "What the old man said today is that I hope you can retreat in the face of difficulties. Don't harm yourself in the future, and don't make things difficult for the young Mississippi. Because in the future, if you can't bear the anger of everyone, she'll be the one to bear it. You're on your own." With that, he turned around and disappeared. On the street, Yi Xian was silent for a long time. In the end, he shook his head and smiled. "Shawan, I'm under a lot of pressure." With that, he lowered his head and looked at the spirit-elegant sword in his hand. A moment later, he suddenly laughed out loud. "To hell with the aristocratic families. I don't have an identity, I don't have an aristocratic family, but I have a sword. With a 3-feet-tall mountain in my hands, I can do whatever I want in the 10,000 heavens and 10,000 worlds. Shawan, wait for me." As soon as he finished speaking, Yi Xian had already disappeared at the end of the street. Yi Xian did not notice that at the top of the prison pagoda, the leftmost sword trembled slightly, but it quickly returned to normal. After Yi Xian disappeared, a woman suddenly appeared on the street. Her clothes were as white as snow. Anlancio. Looking at Yi Xian's departing figure, the corners of Anlancio's mouth curled up slightly, revealing a charming smile. This smile caused the heavens and the earth to pale in comparison. A moment later, Anlancio said softly, "I'll wait for you." With that, she turned around and walked into the distance. Soon, she disappeared into the night. This time, she really left. In the night, a sigh resounded. After Yi Xian returned to Zhonglan Academy, he began to cultivate sword skills. One sword to determine life and death, as well as the imperial sword technique that he had researched. Especially the imperial sword technique. He realized that there was still a lot of room for development in this imperial sword technique. What he needed to do now was to strengthen this imperial sword technique. He wanted to integrate the one sword to determine life and death sword technique into the imperial sword technique. If he succeeded, every flying sword that flew out in the future would be one sword to determine life and death. Its power would increase by several times. Apart from that, he also planned to make good use of his battle intent, sword momentum, and sword intent. He was still not proficient in using it, or it could be said that he could do better in all aspects. It was just that he had been too busy before, so he couldn't calm down and properly integrate them. But now, he had time to properly compose himself. Apart from Yi Xian, who was diligently cultivating, everyone in Zhonglan Academy was madly cultivating, especially the students. Because if they couldn't pass the assessment, they would be eliminated. Here, there was glory, cultivation resources, elixirs, martial skills, cultivation techniques. Who wanted to leave? No one wanted to leave, and if they didn't want to leave, they had to cultivate. Cultivate with their lives on the line. One had to know that there were countless people outside who wanted to squeeze in. Only with competition could there be progress.
Apart from these students, the 70 soldiers from the state of Zhang that Yi Xian had recruited were also madly cultivating, and their cultivation was rather cruel. These soldiers needed to cultivate the murderous aura technique, and the murderous aura technique required killing intent.
In order to train these soldiers' killing intent, Lu Jioge would bring them to a mysterious place that even Yi Xian didn't know about. In any case, every time these soldiers returned, they would be half dead and looked especially miserable. Apart from that, these soldiers usually cultivated inhumanly. Under such intensity, their bodies naturally couldn't bear it. However, Songlan Academy was rich. Golden sore pills, various kinds of great supplement pills, and some elixirs that could strengthen the body, Songlan Academy had enough. Moreover, the lowest level of martial skills these soldiers cultivated was Earth rank. Needless to say, the equipment they used was bright rank. However, Lu Jioge didn't let them use the equipment of the Black Flame Cavalry. If they wanted to use it, they could, but they had to reach her custom-made standards. Only those who passed could use it. These soldiers looked at these bright rank equipment every day, but couldn't use it. How torturous was that? Cultivate. Cultivate with all their might. Most importantly, if they came last in the competition next month, they would be eliminated. Here, the food was the best, the usage was the best, and the cultivation resources were the best. No one wanted to leave. It could be said that almost everyone was cultivating with all their might. Under such circumstances, the growth of these soldiers was extremely terrifying. Other than the cultivation of the students and soldiers, after Zhen Chuchu became the chief treasurer of Songlan Academy, the entire Songlan Academy underwent an earth-shattering change. Every day, many citizens of the imperial capital would enter Songlan Academy for a visit. Everyone had to pay a certain amount of gold coins. Actually, it wasn't a lot and everyone could afford it. However, once there were more people, it would be incredible. In just one day, Songlan Academy had earned a net profit of 20 million gold coins. And Zhen Chuchu directly earned 2 million gold coins. 2 million was very little, but there were other projects, such as the auction of some abandoned land around Songlan Academy. Whoever could obtain a piece of land would be able to build a house there, and then they would be neighbors of Songlan Academy outside the city. Then, Zhen Chuchu sold 5 pieces of land on the first day. They weren't big and each piece was only about 100 square meters. Yet, she sold each piece of land for 30 million gold coins. And the area around Songlan Academy was at least tens of thousands of mu. Other than that, there were all sorts of projects. In any case, on the first day, Zhen Chuchu received a share of nearly 30 million gold coins. It was only a matter of time before this woman became the richest person in the country of Zhang. Other than that, she also recruited a large number of soldiers and recruited many people. Every day, she would go to the mountains to search for gold and silver mines. After nearly half a month of hard work, she really found a gold mine in the depths of a mountain range that was thousands of miles away from Songlan Academy. At this moment, the entire Songlan Academy was in an uproar. A gold mine was of great significance to Songlan Academy. This was because this gold mine could be mined for at least several hundred million gold coins. Of course, as the one who contributed the most, Zhen Chuchu immediately received a reward of several tens of millions. Not only that, Yi Xian also very generously rewarded her with a clear tear spirit artifact, which made her extremely happy. Thus, she hurriedly sent a voice transmission to her younger brother, Zhen Xiaowang, to come as well. It should be said that she also called many people from the Zhen family. With such a generous reward, Zhen Chuchu worked even harder. She even established a small department, a department that belonged solely to her. She recruited nearly 100 people and these people were responsible for all sorts of things. Don't look down on these 100 people. These 100 people were responsible for all of Songlan Academy's businesses. Moreover, most of them contacted many aristocratic families in the country of Zhang and negotiated many cooperation conditions with them. For example, these aristocratic families would pay a certain amount of gold coins to allow their disciples to study at Songlan Academy. As long as they were outstanding enough, they could become official students of Songlan Academy. At first, Yi Xian felt that this would not be very effective because he felt that these aristocratic families were relatively poor. However, he was wrong. Many aristocratic families were not poor at all. Not only were they not poor, but they were also extremely rich. one quota for 30 million gold coins. Songlan Academy had reached an agreement with almost 20 aristocratic families. In other words, every year, they could obtain at least 600 million gold coins from these aristocratic families. Of course, it was completely free cooperation. These aristocratic families could stop cooperating with Songlan Academy at any time. However, Yi Xian realized that these aristocratic families did not have any intention of severing their cooperation with Songlan Academy. This was because after coming to Songlan Academy, their status would be different. Especially some outstanding aristocratic families' disciples, they would even become Songlan Academy's students. Thus, even more aristocratic families came to cooperate with Songlan Academy. In a short period of 2 months, Songlan Academy had undergone earth-shattering changes. Songlan Academy's influence was growing, and so was its strength. However, Yi Xian was slightly worried. This was because Songlan Academy did not have enough high-end strength. He did not know how strong Lu Jiuge, Mo Yuan, and Feng Lan were. Moreover, it was still a question whether these three would fight for Songlan Academy in the future. They were still not strong enough. On this day, the 5th-floor master of the Drunken Immortal Abode came to Songlan Academy. In Yi Xian's room, the 5th-floor master smiled. "Young friend, I have a surprise for you this time." Yi Xian smiled. "Then I am looking forward to it." The 5th-floor master laughed heartily. He took out a box. Inside the box were 5 swords. They were all bright grade swords. At this moment, the 5th-floor master opened his right hand, and a black square box appeared in his palm. Yi Xian was stunned. "This is..." The 5th-floor master smiled. "A true grade sword box. A sword immortal from the Divine Central Continent auctioned this item to the Drunken Immortal Abode for 2.6 billion gold coins. No, it should be 25 million supreme grade spirit stones. Do you want it?" Yi Xian. Genius 1 Second Remember website. Mobile version. Chapter 180. 25 million supreme grade spirit stones? Yi Xian was dumbfounded. After all, he had only obtained a little over 2 million supreme grade spirit stones after obtaining the treasuries of the Chu and Yu states. 25 million supreme grade spirit stones? He wouldn't get anything even if he sold himself. As if he knew what Yi Xian was thinking, the 5th-floor master shook his head with a smile. "Young friend, you might not know this, but truth-grade spirit weapons are extremely precious even in the Divine Central Continent, let alone in our Azure province. Especially something used by a swordsman. It's even more precious." Yi Xian spread his hands and said helplessly, "Senior, I don't have that much money." The 5th-floor master said with a smile, "I know." "Then why did you bring it?" Yi Xian was speechless. Wasn't this making him jealous? The 5th-floor master smiled without saying anything. Yi Xian wasn't stupid. He immediately asked, "Is there any way?" The 5th-floor master nodded and said with a smile, "Young friend, if you can't pay the 25 million supreme grade spirit stones in one go, you can pay in installments." Installments? Yi Xian was stunned. "You can do that?" The 5th-floor master said with a smile, "Others naturally can't, but you can. Of course, it depends on whether you need it or not. If you do, you have to pay at least 25 supreme grade spirit stones to the Drunken Immortal in every month. Within 3 years you have to pay everything back. This is the limit that the Drunken Immortal Inn can do." 3 years. Yi Xian thought about it and then nodded. "All right." The 5th-floor master placed the sword case in front of Yi Xian. This sword case is called Hidden Edge. With this sword case, your sword manipulation technique's power and speed can be increased by at least 30%. With your current strength, if you increase it by another 30%, no one under the 10,000 Dharma realm, except for those top-notch geniuses of the Divine Central Continent, will be able to withstand a single strike from you. Below the Dharma realm. Yi Xian took the sword sheath. It was cold to the touch, and there were some dark golden patterns around the sword sheath. Yi Xian put his right hand together and gently gestured with his fingers. The 5 bright grade swords in the box at the side suddenly flew up, and then one by one, they flew into the sword case. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian suddenly pointed towards the door in the distance. Whoosh! 500 zhang away from the door, 5 swords were neatly stabbed into a large tree. Yi Xian's expression changed. Compared to before, this speed was indeed at least 30% faster.
Now, if he were to fight against someone below the Dharma realm, unless it was a top genius, he could kill his opponent before they could even react.
Yi Xian gently stroked the sword case in his hand.
This thing was indeed a good thing. However, it was too expensive.
Now, he was in debt of more than 20 million best-grade spirit stones. The fifth building master did not stay for long. After receiving 250,000 best-grade spirit stones from Yi Xian, he left. After the fifth building master left, Yi Xian carried the sword case and came to a bamboo forest at the back of the mountain. Standing in the middle of the bamboo forest, Yi Xian calmed his heart. Around him, there was only silence. After an unknown period of time, a gust of wind appeared in the forest. As the wind passed through the bamboo forest, countless bamboo leaves slowly fell from the sky. At this time, Yi Xian suddenly put his fingers together and gently flicked. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. In an instant, 7 sword lights crisscrossed in the bamboo forest like butterflies. After a breath's time, the 7 swords suddenly returned to the front of Yi Xian. At this moment, each of these 7 swords pierced through a stack of bamboo leaves. In the air, only a bamboo leaf was left falling slowly. Yi Xian turned and left. In the bamboo forest, when the bamboo leaf was about to fall, a sword suddenly pierced through the bamboo leaf. In a flash, the sword disappeared. In the following period of time, in addition to frantically cultivating every day, Yi Xian also helped with the construction of Blue Waves Academy. The current Blue Waves Academy was undoubtedly the largest force in Jiang country. In terms of financial resources, it was also extremely rich. It had already far exceeded the annual tax revenue of Jiang country's imperial family. It could be said that the current Blue Waves Academy was developing at a terrifying speed. Just as Blue Waves Academy was developing rapidly, a major event suddenly occurred in the Azure province. In a desolate wasteland in the extreme south of the Azure province, one day, a wisp of sword light suddenly shot up from the ground and into the sky. In an instant, the entire sky within a few hundred li collapsed, but the wisp of sword light did not dissipate and remained in the sky. At this moment, the entire Azure province was shocked. Soon, the entire Azure province was spreading the news that a heaven-grade spiritual tool had appeared in the extreme south of the Azure province. Moreover, this spiritual tool was a sword. A heaven-grade sword. Above the true rank was the heavens. A true rank spiritual tool was already extremely rare in the Azure province, so not to mention Azure province, a heaven-grade spiritual tool was extremely rare even in the central divine prefecture. For a time, the entire Azure province was seething with excitement. Countless people headed to the extreme south of the Azure province, and it was even to the extent that people from Azure Wave province and the central divine prefecture had rushed over. Who wouldn't be tempted by a heaven-grade spiritual tool? All of them were gathered in Azure Wave Palace. Yi Xian took a sip of tea and said, "What do all of you think about that sword in the extreme south of the Azure province?" Mo Yunqi shook his head. "There's something fishy about it." Yi Xian asked, "What is it?" Mo Yunqi said, "I don't know." Yi Xian shook his head. "I don't know." Mo Yunqi was speechless. Lu Joga spoke abruptly. "It's nothing more than a scheme of Xueqi Academy and the other 2 forces." All of them gazed at Lu Joga. Lu Joga chuckled. "It's utterly impossible for a heaven-grade spiritual tool to appear in the Azure province. Even if it did, it wouldn't appear in such a manner. It's like they're afraid that everyone in the world doesn't know about Dao Yi. So, I infer that someone did this on purpose." All of them looked at Yi Xian. There was no doubt that this was targeted at Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled. "They want to lure me over by myself?" Lu Joga nodded. "That should be the case. This is probably a trap that they've set up for you." Yi Xian was slightly puzzled. "Why are they so sure that I'll go there?" Lu Joga smiled. "If I'm not wrong, then that sword is probably real. They're betting that you won't be able to resist its temptation." Yi Xian smiled. "Then they might have made the wrong bet." He was really tempted by a heaven-grade sword, but he wasn't stupid enough to go there despite knowing that it was a trap. Lu Joga suddenly asked, "Why not?" Everyone looked at Lu Joga. Lu Joga smiled. "This is a trap, but it's also an opportunity. Moreover, if you don't accept their attack, they'll definitely make their next move.
Now that you have a big family, there are too many people around you that you need to take care of.
So you can't hide. On the side, Jen Chu nodded in agreement. Miss Lu is right. If you don't accept their attack this time, they'll definitely make their next move. Right now, there's already a death grudge between you and them. They won't give up so easily. Zhang Jiu frowned. They already know Yi Xian's strength. So the trap they've set up over there won't be simple. If he goes there rashly. Lu Joga smiled. What's there to be afraid of? Everyone looked at Lu Joga again. Although she wasn't old, she was always so calm and composed. Lu Joga picked up the teacup in front of her and took a sip. Then she smiled. They've set up a trap. Why can't we reverse it? Zhang Jiu asked. How do you reverse it? Lu Joga put down the teacup and looked at Yi Xian. After Li Mu's death last time, they definitely won't dare to send people in the Dharma realm or the Dharma defending realm to deal with you. This time, the Heaven Sword appeared in the southernmost part of Green Province. If they lure you there can only be 3 possibilities. First, they want to kill you with a borrowed knife. For example, they want to borrow the genius of the Divine Central Continent to kill you. Second, they want to set up a tactical deployment or boundary there to suppress you and greatly reduce your strength. Or, they want to make you unable to exert your strength. What about the third possibility? Zhang Jiu asked quickly. Lu Joga said softly, they want to kill you with the help of that sword. Yi Xian frowned. Kill me with the help of that sword? Can that sword kill me? Jian Chu suddenly said. Yes. Yi Xian turned to face Jian Chu. Jian Chu said softly, the heaven-grade sword has seized the fortune of heaven and earth. It has spiritual intelligence, which is the so-called sword spirit. If it pretends to recognize you as its master and then attacks you at a critical moment, you will definitely die. Heaven-grade sword. Yi Xian's expression darkened. Up until now, the elegant spirit sword in his body was unable to devour a heaven-grade sword. In other words, if a heaven-grade sword were to backfire, he would have no way of resisting it. However, there was no need for him to devour it. If he could obtain it, he could directly suppress it. A truth-grade sword was worth several billion. What about a heaven-grade sword? That was definitely an astronomical figure. He would be lying if he said he was not tempted. However, he also knew that since the other party dared to take out such a precious sword to set up a trap, this trap would definitely not be ordinary. At this moment, Lu Joga said, although it is dangerous, it is also an opportunity. If you go, first, you may obtain a heaven-grade sword. Second, you can buy some time for Blue Waves Academy so that its students and Dao soldiers can have more time to train. At this point, she looked at Yi Xian. You have 12 metal men. Even if the Dharma realm attacks, with your current strength and the addition of these 12 metal men, you will be able to resist for some time. If the Dharma realm doesn't act, even the top 10 geniuses of the Divine Central Continent will find it difficult to kill you. Zhang Jiu shook his head. It is still dangerous. Lu Joga was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly said with a smile, Miss Lu, I have a question. Lu Joga looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian said with a smile, why should I be led by the nose by them? Lu Joga looked at Yi Xian, waiting for him to continue. Yi Xian smiled but did not speak. After a moment, Lu Joga suddenly shook his head with a smile. I miscalculated. Indeed, we can do the opposite. What are you talking about? Mo Yunqi suddenly asked. Lu Joga smiled. Read more books. Mo Yunqi's face darkened. Was he saying he was stupid? At the side, Bai Zhe patted Mo Yunqi's shoulder. You are stupid and do not know yourself. Look at me, although I do not understand, I do not ask. If I do not ask, they will not know that I am stupid. Everyone. Seeing their expressions, Bai Zhe was stunned. Did I say something wrong? Everyone shook their heads. Mo Yunqi patted Bai Zhe's shoulder with a pitiful expression. Bai Zhe. After the sky turned dark, Yi Xian suddenly left Blue Waves Academy. And the moment Yi Xian left Blue Waves Academy, clouds moved in all directions. Great Cloud Realm. Karaki Academy. Mu Qingxian stood in front of Howren Palace. He had been staring at the leaf sword above the horizontal board for a long time. After an unknown amount of time, a black-robed man suddenly appeared behind him. Dean, Yi Xian has already left Blue Waves Academy. Looking at the direction he is going, it should be the southernmost region of Qingzhou.
However, for some reason, after he went to the southernmost region, he suddenly disappeared.
Our people have lost track of him. Mu Qingxian slowly closed his eyes.
After a moment he said softly, "This person is already the sword master.
It is not strange for you to lose track of him. However, it does not matter. He will definitely arrive. He cannot refuse a heaven-rank sword. Inform Great Cloud Empire and Dark World that we can start." Yi Xian went to the southernmost region. No one knew who spread this news, but it spread throughout the entire Qingzhou in an instant. Everyone knew that Yi Xian was definitely going for that heaven-rank sword. For a moment, everyone in Qingzhou was discussing whether that sword would fall into the hands of Yi Xian. However, just when everyone thought that Yi Xian went to the southernmost region, a black-robed man carrying a sword case quietly entered Great Cloud Realm. God knows, Ghost knows. P.S. I discovered that there are not many updates recently, but no one scolded me.
Other than love, I can't think of any other reason.
It is undeniable that you all love me, covet me, want to possess me. Chapter 181. Great Cloud Empire. Great Cloud Empire occupied almost one-third of Qing Province's land area. It was a well-deserved super overlord in Qing Province. At its peak, its imperial power was above all the forces in Qing Province. Even Xueqi Academy and Dark World had to bow down to it. However, there was an old saying that went, "Prosperity leads to decline." After reaching the pinnacle of its power, this once supreme overlord of the Green Province began to decline. After a few muddle-headed emperors wantonly squandered and tossed about, this once supreme overlord was once faced with a split. Just when Great Cloud Empire was on the verge of falling apart, a king appeared in the empire. Lian Wanli. It was this King Yishan who turned the tide and saved the ancient empire that was about to fall apart. Although Great Cloud Empire wasn't at its peak, no one in Qing Province dared to belittle it. Great Cloud Empire's imperial palace, Supreme Harmony Hall. There were only 2 people in the hall. An 11 or 12-year-old boy in a dragon robe and crown was sitting on the dragon throne. The little boy sat upright with a solemn expression. Below him stood a woman. She wore a black, tight-fitting dress with a vivid and lifelike rainbow phoenix embroidered on it. The rainbow phoenix's wings were spread open and its head was raised up high. Its eyes were cold and indifferent, making it look very noble. The little boy looked at the woman. "Sister." Speaking of this, he seemed to have thought of something and hastily changed his words. "Lian Qing, Jiang country is far away from our Great Cloud Empire and has no conflict of interest with it. Why should our Great Cloud Empire be its enemy? It's not in the interest of Great Cloud Empire." The woman walked to the little boy and pointed to the map. "Who do you think is the biggest threat to Great Cloud Empire in Qing Province?" The little boy pondered for a moment and said, "Jiang State." The woman shook her head. "No." The little boy looked at the woman. "Then who is it?" The woman chuckled. "Xueqi Academy, Dark World, and the ancient families in the country." The little boy frowned slightly. "Then why do you want to attack Jiang State?" The woman looked at the little boy without speaking. The little boy pondered for a long time. In the end, he seemed to have thought of something and suddenly raised his head to look at the woman. "You want to use the state of Jiang? No, you want to use that Yi Xian to weaken them." Hearing this, a hint of relief appeared in the woman's eyes. "But our Great Cloud Empire has already lost hundreds of Black Flame cavalrymen," the little boy said in a deep voice. The girl sat beside the little boy, who hurriedly made way for her. The girl held his hand and said, "The Black Flame cavalrymen are no longer loyal to the imperial family. They have been infiltrated by Xueqi Academy, the Dark World, and various aristocratic families. Their true loyalty isn't to the imperial family of Great Cloud Nation. Therefore, the imperial family of Great Cloud Nation doesn't suffer any loss. On the contrary, we can also remove an unstable factor." The little boy tilted his head and looked at the woman. "But if this goes on, Great Cloud Empire will suffer heavy losses." The woman shook her head. "These clans, sects and powers, including Xueqi Academy, seem to be protecting Great Cloud Empire, but they're actually encroaching on Great Cloud Empire. Not only have they infiltrated the imperial court, the army, and even the imperial clan. If this goes on, Great Cloud Empire will be devoured by them in less than 10 years.
As she spoke, she stretched out her left hand.
These forces are like malignant tumors growing on our hands, and they're already connected to our flesh and blood. If we cut them off, we'll naturally feel pain. But if we don't, it won't just be pain, but death. The little boy fell silent for a long time. In the end, he picked up a memorial to the throne in front of him. There were 2 large words on the memorial. Yi Xian. The little boy flipped open the memorial to the throne. It was full of records about Yi Xian from the Azure City until now. There were a lot of detailed records about him. After a short while, the little boy sighed softly. Yi Xian is actually willing to live and die with Jiang country. Alas, how great would it be if Jiang country had such an outstanding talent?
As he spoke, he turned to look at the woman beside him.
Big sister, what do you think of him?
The woman glanced at the memorial and smiled.
What do you think? The little boy thought for a moment and said, I want to listen to you. The woman didn't speak. She just took the little boy's hand and walked out of the hall. She looked at the distant sky and smiled. If he's a friend, he's trustworthy and worthy of being entrusted. If he's an enemy, he should be killed at all costs.
The little boy looked up at the woman.
Big sister, do you want to be an enemy or a friend?
The woman rubbed the little boy's head gently. You're the emperor of Great Cloud Empire.
You decide. The little boy thought for a moment and said, I want to be friends with him. The woman smiled. Why?
The little boy spoke in a deep voice. My Great Cloud Empire has no enmity with him, nor do we have any conflict of interest with him. It's not in the interest of my Great Cloud Empire to be enemies with him, but it's in the interest of my Great Cloud Empire to have a trustworthy friend with him.
The woman looked at the little boy with a trace of gratification in her eyes. She turned to look at the little boy. Pass down my order. Summon all the major families to the extreme south to besiege and kill Yi Xian. Yes. Someone answered in the dark. Big sister?
The little boy looked at the woman in astonishment.
The woman smiled. We're helping him. With that, she looked up at the distant sky and gently stroked her hair behind her ears. Some people are going to be unlucky. Night fell. Countless people suddenly left the imperial capital of Great Cloud Empire. They were all heading to the same place, the extreme south. And their target was Yi Xian. Xueqi Academy, Dark World, and Great Cloud Empire took the lead. These families naturally didn't dare to refuse. If they dared to refuse, then they really didn't want to stay in Great Cloud Empire anymore. It should be known that these 3 forces could be said to be the strongest in the entire Azure province. In the extreme south, a wisp of swordlight was still suspended in the air and didn't dissipate for a long time. Somewhere in the dark, Mu Qingxian and the Lord of the Dark World stood side by side. Their gazes fell below the wisp of swordlight. Beside Mu Qingxian, the Lord of the Dark World suddenly said, Are you confident this time? Mu Qingxian said faintly, The spirit sealing formation underground can restrict his profound qi, making him unable to use the sword. Although his physical body is strong enough without the sword, his strength will be reduced by at least 50%. At that time, it won't be difficult to kill him. Of course, even if we fail, it's fine. That sword will give him a big surprise. With that, he looked at the Lord of the Dark World. Where is he now? The Lord of the Dark World said, My people have already found his traces. He's not far from here and will arrive soon. Mu Qingxian nodded. He clenched his fists and a trace of darkness flashed in his eyes. Let the people underground prepare. Once he enters the surface, activate the formation immediately. Don't give him any chance. The Lord of the Dark World suddenly said, I don't understand. Why is Lian Wanli supporting us this time? You should know that Great Cloud Empire and Yi Xian don't have any grudges. Could it be that he really wants to unify Azure Province? Mu Qingxian sneered. This person is extremely ambitious. It's normal for him to have such thoughts. The Lord of the Dark World nodded slightly. If he wants to unify Azure Province, without the support of Xueqi Academy, it will be as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Xueqi Academy was spread throughout the various countries of Azure Province. If Great Cloud Empire had the support of Xueqi Academy, unifying Azure Province would be much easier. It should be known that Xueqi Academy's influence in these countries was extremely great. Underground. At that moment, there were already more than 100 people gathered underground. Among these people, the weakest was in the Nether Passage realm. Elites. They were all elites of Xueqi Academy and Dark World.
Among them, there were more than 20 people who came from the Divine Central Continent and were all at the peak of the Divine Unity realm.
Of course, this time, their true trump card was the formation underground. Forcefully suppress them. As long as Yi Xian went underground and the formation was activated, Yi Xian would be suppressed instantly. He would not be able to use his celestial qi. Not only would he not be able to use his celestial qi, but he would also not be able to use any secret techniques or magic powers. At that time, if they attacked together, Yi Xian would definitely die. In order to set up this formation, Xueqi Academy and Dark World had spent at least 500 million gold coins and tens of millions of supreme-grade spirit stones. As for that heaven-grade sword, it was borrowed from the Divine Central Continent. This time, they had spent a lot. And all of this was to kill Yi Xian. Yi Xian's growth was too fast, and Blue Waves Academy was also developing rapidly. This time they were no longer afraid, but fearful. If this continued, Yi Xian and Blue Waves Academy would really change the structure of Azure Province, and even threaten their transcendent status. Moreover, they were already mortal enemies with Yi Xian. There was no possibility of reconciliation. Dark World and Xueqi Academy had no way out. Time passed bit by bit. About 2 hours later, a man in black with a sword sheath on his back suddenly stepped into the wasteland. The man in black was holding his head, and his face was covered by a black mask, so his appearance couldn't be seen. And the direction he was walking in was the location of that sword light. Seeing this man in black, Mu Qingxuan's eyes narrowed. He's here. The mistress of the Dark World nodded slightly and quietly retreated. Underground, more than 100 people were accumulating power, ready to attack at any time.
All of them had extremely solemn expressions in their eyes as well. Because the person they were dealing with this time was the youngest swordmaster in the Pine Prefecture. Moreover, Yi Xian still had the 12 golden men. But fortunately, they were already prepared. As long as Yi Xian came down, he would definitely die. On the ground, the man in black was getting closer and closer to that sword light. Just as he was about to enter the formation, he suddenly stopped.
Mu Qingxian was stunned. Not going?
The man in black sat cross-legged on the ground and then began to meditate.
Mu Qingxian frowned. What the hell? Time passed bit by bit, and the man in black didn't move to the limit.
About 2 hours later, the mistress of the Dark World suddenly appeared beside Mu Qingxian and said solemnly, "The situation isn't right." Mu Qingxian stared fixedly at the man in black below. "Find someone to test it out." The mistress of the Dark World nodded. Right at this moment, the man in black suddenly took off his mask. When they saw the man's true appearance, Mu Qingxian and the mistress of the Dark World's faces instantly turned gloomy. The man in black wasn't Yi Xian, but Mo Yunqi. Mo Yunqi raised his head and looked somewhere in the sky, and he grinned. "Are you surprised? Are you surprised?" Mu Qingxuan's face was ugly to the extreme. At this moment, the space in front of him trembled slightly. In the next moment, Mu Qingxuan's face changed drastically, and he roared, "Immediately withdraw the formation, and everyone hurry back to Xueqi College." With that, he and the mistress of the Dark World vanished. They were very fast, and they vanished into the horizon in the blink of an eye. Great Cloud Realm. Xueqi College. A man in black with a sword sheath on his back was confronting a group of Xueqi College students. The man in black didn't make a move, and those Xueqi College students didn't dare to make a move either, because the person in front of them was Yi Xian. Mu Qingxian and the mistress of the Dark World were extremely fast, and the two of them used less than half an hour to rush back to Xueqi College. Seeing that Xueqi College was safe and sound, Mu Qingxian immediately heaved a sigh of relief. He and the mistress of the Dark World landed in front of the man in black. Mu Qingxian stared fixedly at the man in black. "Yi Xian, you?" At this moment, the man in black suddenly untied his black robe and revealed his true face. The moment he saw the man in black's true face, Mu Qingxian felt as if he was struck by lightning, and his face instantly turned pale. Chapter 182. The reason why Mu Qingxian lost his composure was because the black-robed man before him wasn't Yi Xian. Everyone in the surroundings was stunned. It wasn't Yi Xian?
Then what about the real Yi Xian?
As if he had thought of something, Mu Qingxuan's expression suddenly changed, and he turned his head to look at the sky. Heaven-grade sword.
Let's go.
As soon as he finished speaking, he'd vanished. The students of Xueqi College exchanged glances with each other, and they were dumbfounded. Not far away, under the black-robed man's black robe was a beautiful face.
Jian Chu.
Jian Chu raised her head to look at the sky, and the corners of her mouth curled up slightly. I should have gotten it.
As soon as she finished speaking, she turned around and left. 30 minutes ago in the extreme south.
After Mu Qingxian and the mistress of the dark world left, the people underground dispersed the grand formation and came out. Everyone was preparing to rush back to Xueqi College when a man suddenly looked up. Not far away, a cold light appeared. The man's expression changed drastically, and he was about to make a move, but it was too late. A sword directly pierced through his forehead. The man's body instantly stiffened, and blood splattered from his forehead and the back of his head. Everyone's expression changed drastically, and they looked towards the distance. In the distance, a man was dashing over. When they saw this man, everyone was instantly horrified. Because this person was Yi Xian. Wasn't Yi Xian at Xueqi College? Everyone was stunned. At this moment, Yi Xian's speed increased explosively, and at the same time, the 7 swords flew into the crowd like 7 bolts of lightning.
Chi, chi, chi.
In an instant, the heads of the 7 people flew off at the same time.
Instant kill.
As for Yi Xian, he charged into the crowd as well. After he charged into the crowd, those people were about to make a move, but at this moment, the 5 golden men suddenly appeared. In the blink of an eye, 7 or 8 people were instantly killed by the 5 golden men before they could even react. Everyone's expression changed drastically, and they retreated rapidly. At this moment, under the attack of Yi Xian and the 5 golden men, they had completely lost the courage to resist. Because no matter if it was Yi Xian or the 5 golden men, they were instantly killed. Their strength was suppressed without any suspense. By retreating, they had completely destroyed their only hope of survival. If a group of people joined forces, they would still have a fighting chance. In fact, it should be said that they definitely had a fighting chance. After all, these 5 golden men could only exist for 15 minutes. As long as they could drag it out for another 15 minutes, the 5 golden men would disappear and they would be able to stop Yi Xian. In a one-on-one fight, no one could stop Yi Xian, but in a one-on-one fight, they could still beat him. At this moment, Yi Xian had not reached the level where he could fight 100 people alone. Unfortunately, at this moment, they were all scared out of their wits by Yi Xian and the 5 golden men. They had no intention of fighting at all.
Run!
Everyone began to frantically flee in all directions, and Yi Xian's flying sword played a huge role at this moment. The flying sword shuttled back and forth ceaselessly in the field, and every flying sword that flew past would bring along a bloody head. In less than 15 minutes, Yi Xian and the 5 golden men had already killed over 70 people in the field, and over 30 people had already fled. These 30 people were all extremely powerful. They fled in different directions, and Yi Xian and the 5 golden men could do nothing to them. Especially the 5 golden men, who existed for an extremely short period of time. Therefore, Yi Xian did not chase after them. After the 30 people escaped, Yi Xian led the 5 golden men directly underground. In a deep pit, there was a circular altar with a sword in a scabbard floating on it. Around the altar, there were 4 bolts of lightning that locked the sword tightly like iron chains.
Heaven-grade sword. Yi Xian hurried over.
Just as he got close, a sharp sword aura suddenly shot towards him.
Yi Xian frowned and stabbed with his sword.
At the tip of the sword, a cold gleam appeared.
Bang!
The sword aura shattered with a loud bang, and Yi Xian himself took over 10 steps back. On the altar, the sword in the scabbard suddenly trembled violently. Yi Xian did not dare to waste any more time. He immediately commanded the 5 golden men to charge over. Another wisp of sword energy shot out, but it was forcefully blocked by the 5 golden men. Soon, the 5 golden men rushed to the altar and broke the 4 bolts of lightning that locked the sword.
They broke it easily.
Sensing this scene, Yi Xian did not feel happy at all. Instead, his face darkened. As soon as the 4 bolts of lightning were broken, the sword in the middle of the altar was about to escape, but it was held tightly by the hands of one of the golden men. At this time, Yi Xian walked up the altar.
Yi Xian did not touch the sword.
Instead, he had the 5 golden men bring the sword to the second level of the World Prison Pagoda. After entering the World Prison Pagoda, the sword that was originally trembling violently suddenly calmed down. However, it soon began to tremble slightly again. It was afraid. Yi Xian could clearly feel that the sword was afraid. Without thinking too much, Yi Xian closed the door of the first level and left the underground. Inside the World Prison Pagoda, after the Golden Man's spiritual chi was exhausted, he released his hands, and the sword regained its freedom. In an instant, it suddenly flew around the first floor and released rays of sword light to attack the walls of the pagoda. Clearly, it wanted to get out. Unfortunately, the World Prison Pagoda was sturdy enough. No matter how it slashed, the World Prison Pagoda did not suffer any damage. However, the sword did not stop. Instead, it became even fiercer. In an instant, the entire first level was filled with sword light and sword cries. It was very noisy. At this time, at the top of the World Prison Pagoda, a sword in the middle suddenly trembled. In an instant, the entire first level of the World Prison Pagoda became quiet. In the corner, a sword was trembling. Outside, after Yi Xian came out of the ground, Xueqi came in front of him and grinned. The battlefield has been cleaned up. We have obtained more than 40 supreme-grade spirit weapons, 300 million gold coins, 300,000 supreme-grade spirit stones, and other miscellaneous items. As he said that, he sized up Yi Xian. Got it. Yi Xian nodded. Let's go. After that, the two of them quickly disappeared. Not long after Yi Xian and Xueqi left, Mu Qingxian and the Mistress of the Dark World appeared above them. When they saw the corpses all over the place, their faces instantly became extremely ugly. Soon, Mu Qingxian came to the underground. At this moment, the altar was already empty. Completely empty. Mu Qingxuan's face was already livid. He clenched his fists and his entire body was trembling slightly. He did not have the slightest bit of calmness and elegance from before. It was gone. A heaven-grade sword was gone. Mu Qingxuan's heart was bleeding. This sword was borrowed from the Divine Central Continent by Xueqi Academy. In other words, this sword did not belong to Xueqi Academy. It was lost. Even if they sold Xueqi Academy, they would not be able to afford it. At this moment, the Mistress of the Dark World suddenly said, "Does that sword have other mysteries?" Hearing this, Mu Qingxian suddenly woke up. He slowly closed his eyes and formed a strange hand seal with both hands. Soon, the space in front of him began to tremble slightly. After an unknown amount of time, Mu Qingxian frowned deeply and his face was extremely gloomy. "I can't feel it," the Mistress of the Dark World said in a low voice. He should not have officially subdued that sword. Once he does, he will definitely use it. At that time, activate the sword technique and the sword will counterattack. You will definitely be able to kill him. Mu Qingxian shook his head. There was a trace of complexity in his eyes. We have thought too simply of this person. As he spoke, he returned underground and glanced at the corpses that covered the ground. A long time later, he said in a soft voice, "This person should have seen through the trap that we set up, and that's why he acted in such a way. Without the suppression of the Grand Formation, he is already invincible in Qingzhou under 10,000 Laws realm." Invincible. The Mistress of the Dark World remained silent. Because that was the truth. Mu Qingxian once again glanced at the corpses on the ground and his expression was somewhat dejected. This person has a sword immortal behind him. A sword immortal is enough to make both our forces not dare to use the 10,000 Laws realm and those above the 10,000 Laws realm. Besides the 10,000 Laws realm, Yi Xian's strength is already invincible in Qingzhou. Now, his Blue Waves Academy is rapidly developing. With this momentum, in at most a year, the situation of Qingzhou will change. At that time, I'm afraid there will be no Dark World or Xueqi Academy in Qingzhou. Thorough. In fact, he had already seen through everything. And because he saw through everything, the previous plan was actually his last gamble. Unfortunately, it was a complete defeat. Yi Xian didn't fall for it. On the contrary, Xueqi Academy and Dark World suffered a double loss. At this time, the Mistress of the Dark World suddenly said, "Is there any reply from your headquarters?" Mu Qingxian shook his head. "I don't know what they plan to do. However,
Reconciliation is absolutely impossible. Even if Yi Xian takes the initiative to ask for peace, they absolutely won't dare to. If Yi Xian doesn't die, sooner or later he will enter the Central Divine Prefecture. At that time, the headquarters will definitely be fatally threatened. Now, they are also in a difficult position. However, let's see how they make their move. The mistress of the dark world nodded. My dark world too. Now, both of us have already changed from taking the initiative to being passive. If they don't make their move, both our forces will have no choice but to withdraw from Qingzhou. At that time, the development speed of Yi Xian and Blue Waves Academy will be even more terrifying. Mu Qingxian nodded. Wait for the next part. As for that sword, I hope everything goes smoothly. Even if we can't kill him, we have to injure him severely. The mistress of the dark world also nodded slightly. If we can injure him severely, at that time, it will be relatively easier to deal with him. However, this person is courageous and astute, and he himself is incomparably mysterious. That sword immortal is also the same. Until now, we still can't find any information about her. Speaking up to here, he sighed softly. Actually, at that time, Dark World and Yi Xian didn't have any conflict. Unfortunately, Dark World brought this upon themselves and forcefully interfered, making him and Yi Xian become mortal enemies. It would be a lie to say that he didn't regret it. Unfortunately, now, Dark World was the same as Xueqi Academy. There was no way out. After a quarter of an hour, the two left. On the other side, Yi Xian suddenly stopped riding the black wolf. He faced Mo Yunqi beside him. Bring the spoils of war back to the imperial capital and hand them all to Imperial Tutor Lu. She will distribute them. What about you? Mo Yunqi asked. Yi Xian grinned. Let's go to the Great Cloud Realm. Mo Yunqi's expression changed slightly. Bandit Yi, don't act recklessly. The current you should properly develop your own strength. Yi Xian shook his head. All along, they have been targeting me time and time again. Why do they dare to target me? Because they think that I am easy to bully. They think that I will endure it. But this time, I don't want to endure it. Because if I endure for too long, I am afraid that my sword will rust. As he spoke, he grinned. This time, I am going to Great Cloud Realm, not for wealth, not for opportunities, not for cultivation. I am only going to kill. After speaking, he rode the black wolf and charged out. Very quickly, he disappeared from Mo Yunqi's sight. P.S. Recently, a lot of people have come to the circle to diss me. Everyone, don't care about them. They are just jealous of my handsomeness. As the saying goes, those who are not envied by others are ugly. Ask yourself honestly. My writing might not be particularly good, but I am definitely the most handsome in Vertical Book City. There is a poem that says, the first time we met in Vertical Book City, the moment we saw Blue Luan, we were wrong for life. Most men in the world are fickle. Only Blue Luan has high moral integrity. Li Bai. Genius 1 second remember website address. Mobile version website. Chapter 183. Great Cloud Realm. In fact, Yi Xian had wanted to go to Great Cloud Realm a long time ago because he never liked to be passive. All this time, it had always been Xueqi Academy and Dark World attacking, while he could only passively receive their attacks. He didn't want to continue being passive. Previously, he was passive because he was worried about Songlan Academy. But now, Songlan Academy was already on the right track. Even if he wasn't around, Songlan Academy would still be able to operate well. It was time to take the initiative. Just as he said, this trip to the Great Cloud Realm was not for cultivation, not for fortuitous encounters, not for wealth, but to kill. Murder. This time he was going to kill. Watching Yi Xian disappear into the distance, Mo Yunqi was stunned for a long time. Finally, he grinned and said, "Wait for us." With that, he turned around and left. Songlan Academy. The current Azure Billow Academy had undoubtedly become the strongest power in the state of Jiang. Of course, this was inseparable from the help of the Xueqi Academy and the Immortal Intoxication Pavilion. If it wasn't for the assistance of these two forces, it would be impossible for Songlan Academy to develop so quickly. The reason why the state of Jiang and the Drunken Immortal Inn were helping them was obviously because of Yi Xian. It should be said that the interests of the three parties were now tied together. Especially Zhonghua, the reason why they helped Songlan Academy so much was because Zhang Jiu was at Songlan Academy. Songlan Academy's strongest Dao soldier was led by Zhang Jiu. Moreover, the relationship between Zhang Jiu and Yi Xian was particularly unusual. Yi Xian was strong, Songlan Academy was strong. It could be said that Zhang country was strong. The king of Zhang country and Zhang Yuetian were very clear about this. In the future, Zhang Jiu and Yi Xian's goal was the Sea of Stars, not this mere Zhang country. As for Drunken Immortal Tavern, their target was not Azure Province, but the Central Divine Prefecture. They were waiting for Yi Xian to go to the Central Divine Prefecture. It was only a matter of time before Yi Xian went to the Central Divine Prefecture. The greater Yi Xian's achievements in the future, the greater the rewards that the intoxicated immortal house could obtain. The Drunken Immortal Restaurant was doing business, and they were very clear about one thing. Most of the time, investors could be the most profitable. Kanglin Palace. Mo Yunqi, Jian Chuchu, Mo Yuan and the others were all present. Now, the one in charge of Azure Billow Academy was Lu Jioga. Lu Jioga glanced at everyone. Everyone, what do you think about Dean Yi going to Great Cloud Realm? Mo Yuan shook his head. How impulsive. Feng Lan also nodded. The most important thing right now is to develop Songlan Academy and raise his personal strength. If he goes to Great Cloud Realm now, I'm afraid there will be trouble again. Trouble. Lu Jioga laughed. If he doesn't go, there won't be any trouble? Everyone looked at Lu Jioga. Lu Jioga took a sip of tea, and then he chuckled. Right now, we are in a life-and-death situation with Xueqi Academy and the Dark World. If Headmaster Ji hadn't perished, I believe there might be room for negotiation. However, Headmaster Ji has fallen. Given our headmaster's personality, there is absolutely no possibility of reconciliation. Both Xueqi Academy and Dark World are aware of this as well. Hence, there is no possibility of reconciliation between the two sides. With that, she looked at Mo Yuan and Feng Lan. The two of you must not have any thoughts of reconciliation. Otherwise, there will be no future for the Confucian Tao and him. Mo Yuan laughed bitterly. Don't worry. My Confucian Tao will not be as pedantic as before. We have to reason but we still have to fight. Lu Jioga nodded. She glanced at Mo Yunqi and the others. The few of you besides Jian Chuchu are not strong enough. There is already a huge gap between you and him. If you can't make up for this gap, the few of you will only get further and further away from him. Do you understand? Mo Yunqi laughed bitterly. This fellow's strength is growing so quickly. We are also helpless. Lu Jioga shook her head. From today onwards, besides Nji and Chuchu, the two of you will join my Songlan Academy's Dao soldiers and cultivate together with them. Mo Yunqi hesitated for a moment and said, There is no need for the two of us, right? Lu Jioga said indifferently, You think you are very strong? Mo Yunqi chuckled. Although we are not comparable to Bandit Yi, in this Songlan Academy, besides Bandit Yi, Bai Zai and I are considered the strongest, right? Lu Jioga smiled faintly. She turned and looked outside the hall. Dashu. As soon as she finished speaking, a burly middle-aged man walked into the hall. The middle-aged man looked at Mo Yunqi. Mo Yunqi stood up and walked to the side with Daju. In the next moment, Mo Yunqi suddenly vanished, and numerous afterimages appeared. His speed was extremely fast. But bang! Along with a muffled sound, Mo Yunqi returned to his original position. In front of him, the man called Daju didn't move at all. Mo Yunqi and Bai Zai's expressions became serious when they saw this scene. Daju bowed slightly to Lu Jioga and Zhang Jiu, and then he turned and left. The hall suddenly went silent. Lu Jioga glanced at Mo Yunqi. After the meeting, I will take them to a secret place to train. You and Bai Zai can come or not. Besides that, there is one more thing. Our Songlan Academy is about to advance into the Great Cloud Realm. Zhang Jiu looked at Lu Jioga. You want to go to the Great Cloud Realm to develop? Lu Jioga shook her head and smiled. The Great Cloud Realm isn't our goal. The reason we want to advance into the Great Cloud Realm is because after our dean enters the Great Cloud Realm, the Great Cloud Realm will change. We have to be ready to go and support him at any time. Change. Hearing this, the hall quieted down. If Yi Xian went to the Great Cloud Realm, would something good happen? Obviously not. 2 hours later, Lu Jioga and Songlan Academy's Dao soldiers left Songlan Academy. Bai Zhe and Mo Yunqi were also among them. On a cloud ship, in a private room, inside the prison pagoda, Yi Xian stood in the corner of the first floor, and in front of him was a sword with a scabbard. At this moment, the sword was still trembling. Obviously, it was very afraid. Heaven-class sword. Yi Xian's expression was extremely serious. Not because of the sword but because of the pagoda. Ever since he obtained this pagoda, it had been constantly refreshing his understanding. What kind of pagoda was this? Who exactly was that sword immortal sister? Whose swords were those at the top of the pagoda? He had asked himself this question countless times. Unfortunately, he never got an answer. Collecting his thoughts, Yi Xian faced the heaven-class sword in front of him. After a moment, he turned and left. He did not choose to devour it, because his current ability was not enough to devour a heaven-class sword. If he devoured it now, he would most likely be devoured by the sword. No, he would definitely be devoured by the sword, and with his current strength, he would definitely not be able to withstand it. Moreover, the Spirit Elegant sword was only true low-grade. If he devoured this heaven-class sword, the Spirit Elegant sword might cease to exist. He could not devour it. After Yi Xian left the prison pagoda, he came to the deck of the cloud ship. There were still some people on the deck. This time, he did not reveal his identity on the cloud ship because he wanted to give Tsongmu Academy a surprise. Yi Xian came to the bow of the ship. From this position, he could feel the vast horizon, the majestic mountains, and the boundless land. Sensing all of this, Yi Xian's heart became even more calm. Swordsmen cultivated the sword, but also the heart. It should be said that all martial artists cultivated the heart. Heart, there was good heart and evil heart. Heart. Good and evil at the same time. What was good? What was evil? Yi Xian did not know, nor did he want to know. He only knew that he had to be good to those who were good to him. As for those who were bad to him, he naturally had to return the favor. Brother, please make way. At this moment, a voice suddenly sounded in Yi Xian's ears. Yi Xian collected his thoughts and turned around. A woman was standing in front of him. She was wearing an ink-colored long dress. Her hair fell over her shoulders, and her figure was lithe and graceful. She was very elegant and calm. Seeing Yi Xian's appearance, the woman was slightly stunned and exclaimed, "What happened to your eyes?" As she said this, she realized that she had been a bit presumptuous and smiled apologetically. "Sorry." Yi Xian smiled slightly. "It's fine." After saying this, he retreated to the side because he had been blocking the road. The woman nodded slightly. "Thank you." After saying this, she also came to the bow of the cloud ship. The woman looked down at the vast land below and smiled. "It's a great land." After saying this, she looked at Yi Xian who was not far away. "Friend, are you going to the Great Cloud Realm?" Yi Xian smiled. "The purpose of this cloud ship should be the Great Cloud Realm, isn't it?" The woman smiled slightly. "The Great Cloud Realm is the most prosperous place in my Qingzhou. It's naturally good to go and experience it." Yi Xian smiled and did not speak. At this moment, there were sounds of discussion behind her. The woman turned her head and looked. Not far away, some people were discussing spiritedly. It was very lively. These people were all discussing Yi Xian. Currently, in this Qingzhou, Yi Xian was undoubtedly the most popular one. Such a young swordmaster had never appeared in Qingzhou for hundreds of years. The woman shook her head and smiled. She turned around and placed her hands on the pole, looking down at the vast land below. A light breeze blew her hair, quiet and elegant. Yi Xian stood at the top of the cloud ship. He liked this kind of tranquility because it allowed him to calm down. At this moment, 3 cloud ships suddenly appeared in the distant sky. The cloud ships were extremely fast and headed straight for their cloud ship. Everyone on the cloud ship also noticed it and looked at the 3 cloud ships. An old man suddenly appeared on the deck of the cloud ship. This person was the steward of this cloud ship. When the old man saw the 3 cloud ships, his expression changed drastically. Blood Wolf Mercenary Group. Everyone on guard. As the voice fell, some cloud ship guards appeared in the surroundings. When these guards saw the 3 cloud ships, their expressions instantly turned solemn. On the deck of the cloud ship, everyone was a little confused. At this moment, the 3 cloud ships had already approached and surrounded the cloud ship that Yi Xian was on from 3 directions. Opposite Yi Xian, a man walked to the bow of the cloud ship. The man looked down at Yi Xian and the others and grinned. "This time, we should have a good harvest." Yi Xian was stunned. Was this robbery? At this moment, the man opposite him suddenly jumped onto their cloud ship. The man carried a machete and walked in front of Yi Xian. To be precise, he walked to the woman beside him and knelt on one knee in front of the woman. "Big sister." The woman smiled slightly. "Kill all the men, leave the women behind." Yi Xian was speechless. P.S. My dad is seriously ill. He has uremia and diabetes. His leg is ulcerated and needs to be amputated. He is now in the operating room and will be operated on immediately. I came at 7 and was immediately busy until now to update my phone. May there be no illnesses in the world. One more chapter. I'm really sorry that I haven't been able to update 3 chapters recently. After this matter is over, I will resume updating. Please forgive me. Please forgive me. Please remember this site's address in a second. Mobile version. Chapter 184. Kill all the men, keep the women. Yi Xian was dumbfounded. He didn't expect this to come from the woman next to him. He did not know this woman, but from what he saw, she was very kind and polite. Moreover, she spoke very elegantly. She definitely did not look like a bad person. But at this moment, Yi Xian did not expect the woman in front of him to say, "Kill all the men and leave all the women alive." The contrast was too big. Yi Xian looked at the woman. Why? Why? The woman was slightly startled. She turned to look at Yi Xian and smiled. "What do you mean why?" Yi Xian said, "You don't look like a bad person." Bad person? The woman was stunned for a moment. Then, she laughed heartily. She laughed heartily. A moment later, she looked at Yi Xian and smiled. "You don't think I'm a bad person?" Yi Xian nodded. The woman shook her head. A person who looks especially good might not be a good person, and a person who looks especially bad might not be a bad person. Do you understand? If you don't, it's fine. There will be opportunities in your next life. Yi Xian was silent for a moment. Then he nodded. I've learned something. The woman glanced at Yi Xian and smiled. You're quite a calm person. You're quite extraordinary to be able to remain so calm at this point. But you still have to die. Yi Xian smiled. Why don't you bring me back to be your wife? Oh no, to be my big brother. The man beside Yi Xian laughed angrily. Just because you're blind? Be our big brother? You. The man's voice stopped abruptly. A sword was pointed at his forehead. The cloud ship suddenly fell silent. The woman in front of Yi Xian narrowed her eyes. There was a cold glint in her eyes. Yi Xian withdrew his sword. The man was enraged. How dare you? At this moment, Yi Xian swung his sword. The man had only said 3 words when his head was sent flying. Everyone. The woman glared at Yi Xian. Who the hell are you? At this moment, she was also extremely shocked. Because the person Yi Xian killed was at the divine combination realm. Even a god combination stage expert couldn't even retaliate against this sword. Yi Xian walked in front of the woman. He was very close to the woman, and the woman gave off a faint fragrance. Yi Xian shook his head. You're quite pretty. Why would you want to be a thief? The woman said indifferently, I was forced by life. Yi Xian nodded. I'll give you a chance to live. Do you want it? The corner of the woman's mouth rose. I have 21 God Fusion Realm experts here and you want to give me a chance to live? Are you sure? Yi Xian pointed to the right with his right hand. On a cloud ship on the right, a man's head flew off. Everyone on the cloud vessel was completely stunned when they witnessed this scene. The woman in front of Yi Xian was also shocked. Is this the 10,000 Laws realm? On the other side, the manager of the cloud vessel seemed to have thought of something. His expression changed drastically, but soon, it turned into ecstasy and excitement. Yi Xian opened his right hand and a sword fell into his hand. He wiped off the blood on the sword and touched the woman's cheek. A bloody mark appeared on the woman's face. Yi Xian said with a smile, "One last chance. Surrender or die." The woman glared at Yi Xian. "Who are you? Who are you?" Yi Xian said, "You still haven't answered my question." The woman stared at Yi Xian for a long time. After a long time she said, "You're Yi Xian." Yi Xian. The moment she said this, the entire cloud vessel went into an uproar. Who in Qingzhou hadn't heard of Yi Xian? On the cloud ship, everyone's gazes fell on Yi Xian in an instant. Some were curious, some were excited, and some were fiery. Qingzhou's youngest sword master. The manager of the cloud vessel hurriedly walked up to Yi Xian and bowed deeply. "Greetings, State Scholar Yi. I didn't know State Scholar Yi was on the cloud vessel. Please forgive me." Yi Xian smiled. "It's none of your business." The manager bowed deeply again and retreated to the side. Yi Xian looked at the woman. "A chance to live? Do you want it?" The woman grinned. "You're underestimating me." As she spoke, she suddenly floated backwards. Her speed was extremely fast, faster than lightning. At the same time, a silver ray shot towards Yi Xian's forehead. However, before this silver ray could get close to Yi Xian, it was shattered by his goodwill sword intent. At the same time, a sword ray appeared 300 meters away. 300 meters away, the woman's body suddenly stiffened in the air. There was a sword in her forehead. The woman looked at the distant sky in a daze. So fast. On the cloud vessel, Yi Xian opened his right hand. The sword in the woman's forehead suddenly disappeared. When it reappeared, it was already in Yi Xian's palm. However, it quickly flew out again. In an instant, the entire sky was filled with flying swords. 10 breaths later, no one from the Blood Wolf mercenary group was still alive. Yi Xian looked through the spoils of war. There were 300 million gold coins and 500,000 top-grade spirit stones. He estimated that he now had nearly 1 billion gold coins in cash, and about 2 million top-grade spirit stones, excluding the ones used to activate the Golden Man. As for the top-grade spirit weapons and bright-grade equipment, he left them in Songlan Academy. Songlan Academy needed them more than him. He also believed that Songlan Academy would give him a big surprise in the future. He promised Old Ji that he would make Songlan Academy the best academy in Azure Firmament World. He would definitely do it. At this moment the manager suddenly said, "State Scholar Yi, what are your plans for the 3 cloud vessels?" 3 cloud vessels. Yi Xian was slightly stunned and then asked, "How much is one ship worth?" The manager thought for a moment and then said, "About 100 million for one ship." "If State Scholar Yi wants to sell it, my drunken immortal in can buy it." 300 million. Yi Xian nodded. "Sure. Convert the gold coins into top-grade spirit stones and then give it to State Zhong's 5th building master. Tell him that I am repaying the debt." The manager bowed slightly. "Okay." After that he was about to say something, but at this moment, a cloud vessel guard suddenly came. "Steward Wu, we have entered the Great Cloud Territory." Great Cloud Territory. Yi Xian turned around and looked into the distance. Although he had no eyes, he could still feel everything. At the end of the distance, there was the outline of a city. It was very big, several times bigger than all the cities he had seen in Azure Province. "Is this the imperial capital of Great Cloud Empire?" Yi Xian asked. The manager shook his head and said with a smile, "State Scholar Yi, this is not the imperial capital of Great Cloud Empire, but a small city on the border of Great Cloud Empire called Nanqing City with a population of about 5 million. A small city. Yi Xian was a little shocked because even State Zhong's imperial capital wasn't so big. It seemed that he had greatly underestimated Great Cloud Empire. Not only Great Cloud Empire. He was afraid that Dark World and Karaki Academy weren't so simple. But this was also normal. These forces had been passed down for so many years, so they definitely wouldn't be simple. Steward Wu said again, "State Scholar Yi, the cloud vessel will stop in the city for a while to refuel. Although Nanming City is the capital of Great Cloud Empire, it is too far from the imperial capital. In addition, Great Cloud Empire has been corrupted in recent years. Therefore, many places are quite chaotic, especially this small city in a remote place. State Scholar Yi, please be careful if you want to disembark." Yi Xian nodded. "Okay." As though he recalled something, he asked again, "Is there Karaki Academy in the city?" Steward Wu nodded. Yes. Xueqi Academy, Dark World, and various aristocratic families have infiltrated various cities in Great Cloud Empire. Some cities even belong to Xueqi Academy and these aristocratic families. If it wasn't for King Kaoshan, I'm afraid the entire Great Cloud Empire would have been completely divided by these forces. King Kaoshan. Yi Xian made a mental note of these 3 words and nodded slightly. Got it. Steward Wu bowed slightly and left. Soon, the cloud vessel entered Nanqing City and slowly descended. Yi Xian didn't stop on the cloud vessel. Instead, he got off and walked towards the street in the distance. Steward Wu quickly sent a few guards of drunken immortal in to follow him from afar. Although the city was large, the inside of the city was desolate. There were not many people on the streets. At a glance, it was quite desolate. In order to avoid unnecessary trouble, Yi Xian took out his spirit grace sword, which indicated that he was a swordsman. On the street, Yi Xian walked slowly. All of a sudden, a scream came from the right. Yi Xian turned around and saw a group of men chasing a woman in an alley on the right. The woman was panicking as she ran towards Yi Xian. Behind her, several men were chasing the woman like a cat playing with a mouse. Soon, the woman reached Yi Xian and knelt before Yi Xian. Help, help! Yi Xian bent down and held the woman's arm with his left hand. Just when he was about to pull her up, the woman suddenly raised her head. In the next moment, a dagger was already at Yi Xian's throat, but it couldn't move any further because Yi Xian's sword had already pierced into the woman's throat. The scene fell into silence. The woman stared at Yi Xian. At this moment, there wasn't a trace of panic on her face, only resentment. How did you know? Yi Xian shook his head. Firstly, it's too much of a coincidence. Do you think I have the chance to save the damsel in distress? I don't believe it. Secondly, you're running too normally. Under normal circumstances, your steps should be messy, but you're very normal. Thirdly, your eyes, there's panic in your eyes, but there's no despair. Fourthly, actually, all of these are just my wild guesses. I'm just instinctively on guard. She spat out a mouthful of blood essence and fell to the ground. Yi Xian turned around. On the ground in front of him, some strange runes suddenly appeared. Soon, a strange energy fluctuation appeared around him. Formation. Not far away stood an old man. This old man was none other than the cloud ship Steward Wu. Behind Steward Wu, there were 7 men in black. All of them were at the peak of the divine unity realm. Steward Wu looked at Yi Xian and smiled. Surprised? This is a spirit sealing formation specially prepared for you. Now, try circulating your profound energy. Yi Xian circulated the profound energy within his body, but the profound energy within his body was deathly still, and he couldn't circulate it at all. Steward Wu smiled. Yi Xian, you underestimate our Dark World and Xueqi Academy. P.S. I've been typing on my phone lately, so there might be some typos. Sorry. The hospital is too torturous. Genius in a second. Remember this site's address. Mobile version. Chapter 185. Dead End? Yi Xian laughed. When he saw Yi Xian laugh, Steward Wu frowned. He still has a trump card? Without hesitation, he waved his right hand. Kill! As soon as he spoke, the 7 men in black behind him dashed out. They were all top-notch assassins and were extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, they had arrived before Yi Xian. Obviously, the spirit sealing formation was only targeting Yi Xian because the men in black were not affected. At this moment, bang! 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 As a series of muffled sounds rang out, the black-clothed men retreated rapidly. Steward Wu's expression changed. This was because there were 5 golden men standing before Yi Xian. However, the 5 golden men were not affected by the spirit sealing formation at all. Naturally, they would not be affected by the spirit sealing formation because the formation inside the bodies of the 5 golden men was much more powerful than the spirit sealing formation. After repelling the men in black, the 5 golden men suddenly bombarded the ground. Steward Wu's eyelids twitched. Retreat! Retreat! Steward Wu and the others turned and ran. The moment he knew that the formation was useless, he chose to retreat decisively because once the formation was broken, Yi Xian would be invincible under the Dharma realm. He was invincible. Before Steward Wu and the others could run far away, an explosion suddenly sounded behind them. The formation was broken. Manager Wu was horrified in his heart, and he suddenly sped up. Right at this moment, a sword suddenly appeared in front of him. Manager Wu's pupils constricted, and he was just about to attack when the sword directly pierced through the center of his forehead. He could not fight back at all. At the same time, the black-clothed men by Manager Wu's side instantly fell to the ground as well. That was because a sword had pierced through their foreheads as well. Behind them, Yi Xian walked over slowly. Looking at the corpses on the ground, Yi Xian shook his head. What a waste of my spiritual stones. As soon as he spoke, he pointed with his finger and the swords flew back into the sword box in his hand. After cleaning up the battlefield, he shook his head. Because these people were too poor. They were so poor that they did not even have 50 million gold coins in total. Top-grade spirit stones were even rarer. As if he had thought of something, he turned his head and looked not far away. There were two people standing there. Mu Qingxian and the mistress of the Empire. In fact, when Yi Xian left the country of Jiang, the Karaki Academy and the Dark World had already sent people to investigate Yi Xian's whereabouts. They naturally had to keep track of Yi Xian's movements at all times. When they learned that Yi Xian had come to the Great Cloud Realm, the two of them were already a little flustered. Previously, Yi Xian was passively defending, but now, Yi Xian took the initiative to attack. In a situation where the 10,000 Laws realm could not make a move, who could stop Yi Xian? If this chapter is not finished, please turn the page. No one. But the F*King Dharma realm couldn't make a move. Because Yi Xian also had a backer. If there was no backer, the two forces could still bully the weak and play however they wanted. But the problem was that Yi Xian's backer was too terrifying. Killing the Dharma defensive realm was like killing a chicken, which made them not dare to bully the weak anymore. Helpless. Aggrieved. This was the mood of Mu Qingxian and the mistress of the Dark World. Those who could kill Yi Xian did not dare to make a move, and those who could make a move could not kill Yi Xian. How helpless and aggrieved was this? Yi Xian did not speak and turned to leave. Say what? He had nothing to say to the Karaki Academy and the Dark World. Mu Qingxian suddenly appeared not far in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian stopped in his tracks. Mu Qingxian said, "There is no possibility of reconciliation in this matter, right?" Reconciliation? Yi Xian grinned. Who was the one who said to me that I would not rest until one of us is dead? It seems to be you? Why now, you don't want to rest until one of us is dead. Mu Qingxian said calmly. Do you really think you will win? Yi Xian, if we continue to fight, both sides will suffer. You. Yi Xian shook his head. Don't talk so much nonsense. If it's not you guys killing me, then it's me killing you. As he said this, he walked around Mu Qingxian and walked into the distance, but soon, he stopped again. By the way, may I ask how to get to the Karaki Academy? Mu Qingxian. Ha. Amidst his laughter, Yi Xian disappeared at the end of the street. After Yi Xian left, Mu Qingxian slowly closed his eyes. Beside him, the mistress of the Dark World said in a low voice. Were you trying to stall for time by making peace with him? Mu Qingxian nodded. If this person goes to the imperial capital, no matter if he goes to the Dark World or my Karaki Academy, you and I will not be able to stop him. Only the headquarters of the Divine Central Continent can stop him. And the headquarters needs time. The reason I made peace before was to buy some time, and this person has clearly seen through my intentions. The mistress of the Dark World said in a low voice. What now? Mu Qingxian opened his eyes and looked into the distance. We must stop this person from entering the Great Cloud Imperial Capital. Otherwise, it will be a disaster for the Dark World and my Karaki Academy. Let's go and find the Great Cloud Reliance King. After saying this, the two disappeared. In the city, Yi Xian found the Karaki Academy, but unfortunately, there was no one in the Karaki Academy in the city. They all left. Not only did they leave, but all the valuable things in the entire Karaki Academy had been taken away. Yi Xian could not help but swear at her. Yi Xian did not stop. He turned and left. And now, his goal was the Great Cloud Imperial Capital. Great Cloud Imperial Palace. A woman was sitting on the "This chapter is not over, please turn the page" in front of a pond. Her feet were floating in the pond. Around her feet, There were countless small black fish. The woman lowered her head and looked at the small fish in the pond. Her pair of pure white jade-like feet gently swayed in the water. Seeing the small fish constantly sucking on her little feet, the corners of her mouth couldn't help but curl up into a smile. At this moment, an armored woman with a long sword at her waist walked in front of the woman by the pond and bowed slightly. "My king, Dean Mu, mistress of the dark world, requests an audience." The corner of the woman's mouth rose slightly, and her smile became more charming. "Please." The armored woman turned and left. After a while, Mu Qingxian and mistress of the dark world came to the side of the pond. When he saw the woman, Mu Qingxian bowed slightly. "Miss Lian." Very polite. In fact, he did not dare to be impolite. Although the Great Cloud Empire was not as strong as before, no one dared to underestimate it. After all, it was once the #1 overlord of Qingzhou. Moreover, this Lian Wanli was even more unfathomable. At least, Xueqi Academy and the Dark World did not know Lian Wanli's true strength. Lian Wanli slowly got up, walked in front of the two, and smiled slightly. "Are the two of you here for that Yixian?" Mu Qingxian nodded. "Yes. The two of us want to ask for help from Miss Lian." Lian Wanli smiled and said, "You are too polite. Xueqi Academy, Dark World, and my Great Cloud Empire are one and should help each other. How about this? I will send out 50 black flame cavalrymen. What do the two of you think?" Mu Qingxian was overjoyed and quickly said, "That would be great." Lian Wanli smiled slightly. However, in order to give an explanation to those stubborn old men in the imperial court, this king hopes that the two of you can give some compensation. It is not much. How about 10 million best-grade spirit stones as a token? Mu Qingxian and mistress of the dark world hesitated. Lian Wanli said indifferently, "Do the two of you think it is not worth it?" Mu Qingxian smiled bitterly. "It is worth it, of course it is worth it. 10 million it is." Lian Wanli smiled and said, "Straightforward. That Yixian is not simple. 50 black flame cavalrymen might not be enough. How about this? I will gather all the great families and let them contribute. As long as all the powerhouses in my great cloud realm join forces, it should not be difficult to get rid of a trifling Yixian." Mu Qingxian smiled and said, "This is naturally for the best. My great cloud realm is united. We are naturally not afraid of that Yixian." Lian Wanli suddenly frowned. "It is just that these families probably won't cooperate." Mu Qingxian smiled and said, "Rest assured, you and I have spoken, they won't dare to not cooperate." Lian Wanli smiled. "That is good." Mu Qingxian and mistress of the dark world thanked him repeatedly, then turned and left. After the two left, Lian Wanli shook his head with a face full of indignation. This Xueqi Academy and Dark World are too bad. So many people bullying one person. Really shameless. This king really can't stand it anymore. Come, bring this king's heavy azure dragon blade. This king wants to peel a pear. The Armored Woman. End of this chapter. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.